This regular Medicine Hat City Council meeting of June 5th, 2023 is called to order at 6:30 p.m. We will begin with a moment of prayer or reflection. I'll now read the city's land acknowledgement. The City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respect to all Indigenous peoples and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their cultural heritages and relationships to the land. Are there any councillor announcements? Seeing none. Moving on to adoption of the agenda. Are there any objections or amendments to the agenda as presented? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted as presented. Adoption of the minutes, any objections, errors, or omissions on the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council dated May 15th, 2023. Seeing none, the minutes are adopted. Moving on to item 8, public hearings. Item 8.1, Bylaw 4771 to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from community service district to medium density residential district. We'll first have an introduction from Robert Sissons, Manager, Planning and Development Services, and then I will call the hearing to order and call for other presentations or submissions. Go ahead.
Sometimes it just takes a minute. So good evening. My name is Robert Sissons, Manager of Planning, and I'm here to present Bylaw 4771. So I've just included a brief overview of the presentation. So I'll talk about site location, the bylaw amendment details. I will provide an overview of Community Services Reserve. There's some photos of the site and then staff's or administration's recommendation. So the site undergoing the rezoning is 401 Southlands Boulevard. It is located at the corner of 13th Avenue Southeast and Southlands Boulevard in the Southlands neighborhood. The application is to rezone the subject site from Community Services District to Medium Density Residential District. Development permit application was previously issued in 2020 for a multiple unit residential development. So in this case, kind of how we would describe it would be townhouses. And I'll note that at the time planning did suggest that the site be rezoned prior to the sale of and development of the site, but it was allowed under community services at that time. So a land use bylaw amendment in 2022 removed residential land uses from the community services district, resulting in the current development becoming a legal non-conforming land use. The site can remain as is until the 2024 land use bylaw is updated. However, we have received requests for home businesses at this location, which wouldn't be allowed until the zoning change, which is why we are here today. So a question did come up at Municipal Planning Commission as to why was the residential listed previously under community services and why was it removed? So Community Services Reserve, this is a little bit of a deeper dive into the MGA, but Community Services Reserve is a special designation under Section 672 Sub 3 of the Municipal Government Act. So where there is a surplus school site and it's designated as school reserve on the land title, instead of transferring it back to the municipal reserve, a council may designate the school building footprint as CSR. Section 671 sub 2.1 allows for CSR to be used by a municipality for various purposes. So affordable housing is listed as one of those many, as one of many of these purposes, which is why it was originally included back in 2013 when the land use bylaw was developed as an option under the community services zoning. So school sites are always zoned as community services district in the land use bylaw. However, Medicine Hat does not have any sites designated as CSR. And the reason for that is just that most of our older sites where this may have been applicable are not designated even as reserve land because it predates a lot of the legislation. So an example more recently that came up was Riverside School and Earl Kitchener. So this aligns with Council Strategic Plan Priority 1.9, which is administration is proactively clearing up a historic issue that is impeding and placing restrictions on development. In terms of municipal development plan policy, the site is located within the south residential sector and is designated as a suburban typology. So the site is highlighted in yellow on the map. And small scale, low to medium density multiple unit residential developments are both common and appropriate in this context. So under the original Southlands Area Structure Plan, the site was identified as medium density residential, and the approved development is consistent with this original development concept. So here's an overhead view of the site during construction from, I believe, about a year or so ago. And this is a view of the site looking south along 13th Avenue. This is a view looking east at the entrance of the Southlands neighborhood. And this picture just shows the entrance to the development from the park. This picture shows the portion of the development that fronts onto 13th Avenue Southeast. This is at the rear of the development where the emergency access is located. And then this is the edge of the development along the lane. So administration's recommendation is, it is recommended through the Municipal Planning Commission that City Council approve bylaw number 4771 to rezone 401 Southlands Boulevard from Community Services District to medium density residential district. Thank you.
Well done on the 5 minutes. I will now call the public hearing for, I don't know why I did that, bylaw 4771 to order. City Clerk, were there any submissions received on this item?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. So the City Clerk Department, on behalf of Planning and Development Services, sent out 49 notifications and advertised in the local newspaper on May 20th and 27th. Today, we did receive one submission, and I'm going to read it into the record for everyone. It's from Rolanda and Steve Stillinger. To whom it may concern, I would like to express my complete dissatisfaction with the subdivision that has been directly built behind my house. This area was not zoned for this type of development. My husband and I have built this house 9 years ago, and we adored the privacy the open field provided. We knew eventually something would be constructed. However, the proximity to our house and yard is an absolute travesty. We have no privacy when we are outside. These multifamily units have decks that are too close to my yard and has deterred us from even wanting to sit outside for supper. The new homeowners can hear everything we discuss, and it feels as though they are watching our every move. This is completely unacceptable. The yards will now use our fence that we built and paid for. We have invested our hard-earned money into this property to now have our property devalued, as many would find this unappealing. We were not given any input or voice to the rezoning situation. The lack of consultation is wrong and completely unacceptable. It affects our way of living and our ability to enjoy our home and yard. None of us want to go out, which is absolutely awful. I'm not sure how this matter can be resolved since the construction has already concluded. Property taxes need to be adjusted for our inconvenience, and I urge those responsible in passing this horrendous development with absolutely no consideration for the people who have paid for these lots, which were not cheap, to find a fair solution. Thank you, Mayor Clark.
Thank you, City Clerk. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. For a second time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. For a third and final time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. I will remind council we are in a public hearing right now. You're also at liberty to ask questions to our manager of Planning and Development Services. Caleb?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'm here to ask my usual question because this is medium or higher density residential housing. Where is the nearest bus stop and grocery store to this location?
I do not know. Managing Director Stouth or Manager Sissons, do you have the answer for that question?
If you can bear with me for a second, I'm bringing up the transit map.
Certainly. While we're waiting, Councillor Knodel, you have a question?
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Through the chair, likely to, I don't know exactly, but somebody will be able to help me. I am curious about the rules about a 6-foot tall fence and the possibility that in this situation, we may be able to offer some sort of privacy wall approval process or sound barrier. I'm not sure what exists in situations like this where a backyard becomes compromised by the neighboring buildings, but what kind of options exist in regards to privacy and noise protection?
So, Managing Director Stouth, do you have the answer to Caleb's question?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the chair, there is a transit stop located on the north east corner of that development, and there is one about a block north of the northwest corner on 13th Avenue Southeast.
Go ahead.
And the second part, what is the nearest grocery store? Or sorry, how far away is the nearest grocery store?
Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I'm thinking that if we want like a specific amount of kilometers, the best strategy would be a Google Maps search. I'm just wondering if Mr. Orridge has Google Maps.
My apologies, Councillor Knodel. The reason I keep asking this question is because I really would like the city to consider when someone is moving into something like affordable housing or a multifamily unit that they may choose not to own a car, which means getting groceries would have to be done through transit or on foot. So my two questions are specifically about addressing that difficulty. I can look that up for myself, but I want it brought up in council so that it's part of the decision-making process.
Noted. Thank you. Manager Sissons, Managing Director South.
I can try and answer that. I did not run this through Google Maps, but the closest full-size grocery store, I believe, would be Save On Foods off of Strachan Road. Across the street from that is Sobeys, and across Trans-Canada Way is Superstore.
2.2 kilometers. 2.2 kilometers. Sorry.
Councillor Knotel says it's 2.2 kilometers to the nearest grocery store. Thank you. And then Manager Sissons, the question to you about options regarding additional privacy in instances like this.
So through your worship, with this particular development, it does already exceed the medium density development setbacks. If this was single family, this would be even further back. Most of the land that we see in this area, they have decks within 3 to 6 meters of the property line. So in terms of, is this out of line with what typical development you would see? I would say no. You have often development that's even closer. In terms of fencing, typically that is between adjacent landowners, right? So if at this point the land is not in city's ownership, it has been sold and developed by a private developer, and there's a whole group of existing landowners to the south. So,
If I may just try and refine, the 6-foot fence limitation, is there exemptions to that?
so through your worship, yeah, the rule in the bylaws is 2 meters in height, and it can be varied if that's sought. It's more about it's likely going to come down to the cost of construction, and would that be an effective method to screen? I would perhaps suggest landscaping as a better alternative.
Thank you. Just for awareness, though, if someone did want to vary their fence, they would contact Planning and Development Services, and I'm getting a nod. Councillor Van Dyke.
Thank you, and through the chair, I just had a question about allocation of lands and zoning and developments in general. If a portion of land that is not designated residential in a development is rezoned to residential of any kind, is an equivalent area that's undeveloped then zoned for that previous land use? Or is it lost to the development?
So through your worship, so typically in a neighborhood, you'll have varying amounts of land use allocated to different types of things. So some neighborhoods are going to be all low density residential. There are stipulations, for example, on how much parkland. So 10% of the developed area is always dedicated towards municipal reserve, and that's for schools, parks, etc. In terms of allocating land for other types of land uses, so commercial, typically you'll see neighborhood commercial or a community services plot of land. So in this case, it would have been likely they're looking at the market for a church site or a assisted living facility site, that type of thing. So generally a developer at the start of the process, and in this case, this would have been, for this phase of Southlands, that would have been the city, but back in the early 2000s, they would have looked at the market and said, you know, is there nearby commercial that's going to be serving these residential areas? And in this case, there was a major commercial component to the overall Southlands area, so they probably ruled out that commercial component in that area. And then it would have been, is the market needing that community services land? It's not a mandated requirement or anything like that. Yeah.
Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, I have just a series of questions just so I understand exactly what happened here. So construction began October 2020.
Development permit was issued
Oh,
2020.
the development permit was, okay, and then construction started sometime after that. When that development permit was issued, what would have been the process for anyone who didn't like the development permit being issued? There's an appeal. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so through your worship, after any development permit is issued, any affected neighbor or person in the area can make an appeal, depending on whether it's a permitted use or discretionary use in that district, would determine as to kind of what rights you would have to appeal that. So for example, if it's a permitted use and they comply with the land use bylaw, there's very limited scope of what you can appeal. It's mostly just about process. Did the city follow the process in the review? If it is a discretionary use, there is always the right to appeal. If it's a permitted use and there is a variance granted, there's also the right to an appeal. And then there's a limit on how long you have to appeal. So it's 21 days after notification. In this case, the City of Medicine Hat, we notify in the Medicine Hat News on the Saturday subsequent to the approval.
So this neighbor who's written a letter, and I appreciate their concerns. They thought they were in a situation, now they're in a different situation, I'm not. But their remedy would have been sometime in October, November 2020. In terms of they could have appealed because it was a discretionary use then.
Through your worship, yes, under the community services zoning at that time, multiple unit residential was a discretionary use. They could have appealed it.
Okay, so what we're dealing with today, just go back in time. So it was a discretionary use, then in September 2022, we removed it as a discretionary use. And so what we're being asked to consider today in this bylaw is just cleaning up the fact that it's now non-conforming because we sort of did things slightly out of order. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Counselor Sharps?
Sorry, yes, just one question. When we post it in the newspaper, do we also knock on their doors? So does a person have to be looking at the paper under their address every week to see if there's going to be a development permit, or do we issue letters? Is there anything else that goes out to notify them?
So through your worship, with development permits, it is only advertised in the paper. It wouldn't be, the only time that a landowner, an adjacent landowner is notified is during a subdivision or a land use bylaw amendment, so rezoning. So in this case, of the rezoning, the adjacent neighbors would have been notified. And in terms of what is the requirements of a municipality to notify for development permits, it varies. Every community does it slightly different.
Are there things that you see that potentially we could do that other communities are doing to increase the awareness, like a sign or something like that?
Yeah, so through your worship, that is one method. So typically, and I'll give an example of Calgary on major applications, they would have a signage posted on site, typically for a period of time, to solicit comments from impacted adjacent property owners. That's one method.
Thank you. And just for absolute clarity, what would the consequences be of not approving this bylaw?
So through your worship, currently the development is in a legal non-conforming status, meaning that at the time that they received their development permit, everything was in accordance to the bylaw. So at this point, there would be some limitations on what they could do going forward. So home-based business, for example, they can't. We've had some people inquiring about that, and we would have to say no to that. But essentially, it's grandfathered at this point, is kind of the more common term. As we roll into 2024, we're looking at kind of zoning throughout the city, and we would look to update it to the appropriate level of zoning at that time.
All right, seeing no further speakers, I now declare the public hearing closed.
So, Your Worship, at this time, I move that council give second reading to bylaw 4771, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from Community Services District to Medium Density Residential District.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none. We'll vote on second reading. There you go. And that passes unanimously.
Thanks, Your Worship. At this time, I move that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4771.
Discussion? Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you, Councilor McGrogan seconds. Discussion? Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on the third reading. That's unanimous, and bylaw 4771 is passed. Moving on to item 8.2, bylaw 4786, to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from Community Services District to Medium Density Residential District. And we will first have an introduction from Robert Sissons, Manager, Planning and Development Services.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So I'm here to present bylaw 4786. So I've included a brief overview of the presentation, and I'll just note that this particular bylaw is very similar to the previous one that we just dealt with. Essentially the same. There's a couple of minor differences in terms of location, but it's the same context that applies. So the site is undergoing the rezoning, is 79 Kyla Road Southeast. It is located along Kyla Road, about halfway between Cary Drive and the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede grounds. Most people remember this site as the former Scout Hall. So the application is to rezone the subject site from Community Services District to Medium Density Residential District. A development permit application was previously issued in 2021 for multiple unit residential development, in this case also townhouses. Again, the same thing that planning did recommend at the time, that it was changed to medium density just to better reflect kind of the nature of the development. A land use bylaw amendment occurred in 2022, removing residential land uses from the Community Services District, resulting in the current development becoming a legal non-conforming land use. And as previously mentioned, the site can remain as is until the 2024 land use bylaw is updated. However, we have also received requests and inquiries for this site as well for potentially future home businesses.
Can you, I apologize, go back to the previous slide. What is the address of this site?
So, sorry, yeah, this is 79 Kyla Road.
Thank you.
Sorry, that must have been a typo in the presentation.
I figured as much since those are the same as the last one.
Yep. So I won't kind of go through all this same next two slides in detail, but essentially it is the same situation that applied to the previous site where at the time it was residential was allowed under community service, and today that has since changed. So again, this aligns with Council Strategic Priority 1.9, and administration is proactively cleaning up some historic issues that is impeding and placing restrictions on development. In terms of MDP policy, the site is located within the South residential sector and is designated as a suburban typology. The site is highlighted in yellow on the map. And small scale, low to medium density residential developments are both common and appropriate in this particular context. So here's an overview of the site during construction. The view of the site looking east. And this is a view of the site looking south towards the park. This is the entrance to the site along Kyler Road. This is looking east along Kyler Road at the front of the development. This is the view from the park in behind the development. And another view of the development from the park. So administration's recommendation is, it is recommended through the Municipal Planning Commission that City Council approve bylaw number 4786 to rezone 79 Kyler Road Southeast from Community Services District to Medium Density Residential District.
Thank you. We'll now call the hearing for bylaw 4786 to order. I will note that there is a grocery store 3 kilometers away and a bus stop fairly close on the same road. It's
Bus stop's right in front.
right in front, okay. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. For the second time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. For the third and final time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. City Clerk, did we receive any written submissions?
Thank you, Your Worship. We did not receive any written submissions. The City Clerk's Department, on behalf of Planning and Development Services, did send out 113 notifications and advertised May 20th and 27th in the local newspaper.
Thank you. Yes, please come forward. If you could please state and spell your first and last name and let us know whether you're speaking for or against the bylaw.
Hello, Madam, Honorary Madam and Councilors. I'm here to be the voices of the people excuse me, that didn't have an opportunity to make to have the chance to talk to City Council. The letter that you previously read from the lady stating about how it's inconvenienced many people in our neighborhood with taking the green forest, the land, the park, and changing it into a 3-story, 3-building condo. We weren't given a letter or notice that these buildings were going to be put up behind us. None of the pictures showed how close that building is to our property. My name is Donna Reed, R-E-E-D. I was just wondering if there could be some sort of better system in our city council to inform people of how big of a change that is, how huge of a change going. We bought and invested in our properties because of the park, because of the greenland and the deer and all the natural things that are there. But we, even if we were notified by a letter, or I know it was in the paper, but you don't look for those things to think that the park behind you is going to be taken away. I was told that maybe I wasn't on the mailing list, and that's why I never got a letter or was informed of the development. But I did get a letter from the city, May 16th, 2023, stating, and this is already, the building's already completed. It just has another month or so before it's finalized. I talked to a member of the Planning and Development. Came to City Hall and discussed this particular rezoning and the bylaw, and I'm just learning. All this is brand new, as you can tell, to me. So if I was on the mailing list, I got this letter. I got this letter from the city telling me to be at this council meeting, but we never got any. It would have been very appreciated by the few people that are really affected. We butt right our properties. We're in the community living center, the lack of a better term, the trailer park, and it is literally right across the back alley. If I personally would have been informed by the city that that kind of a building was going to be replacing that beautiful park, I would have probably sold my property when the value was at a good price. I put a fence in the backyard so we could walk out and enjoy that beautiful park. But if I would have had some sort of knowledge on what type of development was going up, I would have tried to sell my property. But as is, there's no system set up. I wish there was a better system in letting people be aware of how big of a change your life takes when these developers come in and put up such a different landscape from the green park to a solid 3-story wall going, and this wall, like the lady in this previous letter had stated, there will be no privacy in my yard or the lady's yard next door. This has changed our lives. It's changed the potential money that we could have gotten from our property. I did talk to the person in planning and development. He tried to, he was very thorough and very kind in trying to explain to me how the medium services, the medium density residential district is. So I'm trying to understand all that. But I wish, and he even admitted that the process, Medicine Hat doesn't or could do a bit better in sending out a letter. A letter is better than a little tiny advertisement in the paper. That doesn't really cover the kind of lifestyle that we've endured, not only through the whole year of construction. And I understand the building is completed now. I just found it a little bit ironic that I would get this letter explaining everything to me now when the building's already, I wish I would have received this letter from our city before the construction even started. But as is, it's built, and I guess my voice here is just to help all the councillors maybe try and find a way that we could better inform people of these really big changes in our neighborhood. It's a big change from a park to a 3-story building. That section, I think it's a 4 or 5 acre parcel. And I know Calgary and Edmonton have better ways of informing the public of this, and I know the gentleman had suggested to put signs up, but the most accurate way is by the letter, by stating to the people that are butted right up to the major property that's being built. The second floor balcony looks directly over top into my yard. And that is going to change the privacy of our properties.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
I
Ms.
think I've
Reed.
had my 5 minutes, right?
Thank you. Unless there are any questions from council, Councillor Knodel?
I can't make a comment, can I,
No.
towards Ms. Reed?
Is it content specific? Can't state your opinion.
I just want to give positive feedback about, I just wanted to say I appreciate your bravery and your willingness to advocate for your community and your neighbors. And I hope that we can make positive change in our communication strategy so other people don't have to go through what you've gone through.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Manager Sissons? Councillor Knodel?
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Through the chair to Manager Sissons. Manager Sissons, would you tell me what opportunity there is to, now, I don't know exactly what the property lines look like. I walked through there on a dog walk recently, but there was still a lot of undeveloped, like just gravel, and like it's kind of still in a state of being incomplete. So is there room for trees, grass that might be able to be landscaped in between to create a little bit of a buffer in this particular situation? I understand that it's probably a private developer, but is there conversation that we could have to advocate for some more greenery?
So through your worship, when they submit their development permit, there is an approved landscaping plan that is put in place. So to make changes now, we can't really go back and do that. Will note that there is a major electrical line that runs along, like north-south along the east side. So you wouldn't be able to have any kind of landscaping that would interfere with that as well. So there is kind of a buffer already, and it's pretty substantial because it is a high voltage line. So in respect to the previous lady that could you landscape there to kind of provide a buffer? No, because of the electrical line. Pardon? We would have to look at the approved landscape plan to see what was approved at that point. And then it would be really just up to the developer's decision if they were wanting to change that to reflect.
Quick follow-up, if you're okay. If Ms. Reed wanted to advocate for something like that to the developer, is there a channel, a communication channel that she could pursue to communicate what she shared with us tonight to the developer? Or is there any use doing that?
So through your worship, if she does want to, she can contact our department and we can relay that to the developer. Generally speaking, I mean, right now it's kind of just finishing up construction. So usually landscaping is the final phase of a project, and depending on, the availability of plants, that type of thing. And sometimes landscaping will happen in the fall too. So maybe preemptive in terms of, or premature, I guess, in terms of where the landscaping is at right now. But we can definitely pass on any message.
Councillor Sharps?
Thank you. I'm slightly confused. I need some clarification. So this has already been done, right? So everything's done. We're just actually changing it from non-conforming to conforming at this point. So do I have that right?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct.
Okay, so then my question is, when this was changed, when this was rezoned in 2020, did you say?
So through your worship, the zoning on this parcel has been like that for quite some time, as it was the Scout Hall previously. The development permit was issued in 2021.
Okay, sorry, thank you for clarifying. So in 2021, when that development is issued, and there's all that green space, do we take that and understand that it's a green space that our community is using, and we really go above and beyond. And I'm, like, I guess, to me, knocking on a couple of doors is something that, you know, I would see, but is, like, what do we do? Exactly what do we do? To what extent?
City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you through the chair, and I just keep cringing every time you say knocking on doors because I'm thinking of manpower. But I do think that we could do a better job. Like, I really think we could implement something like signage, because you are right, not everybody reads the paper, and I think we can do a better job of actually posting to make sure that people are aware. But knocking on doors gives me a little
Okay,
palpitation.
I won't give you a heart
Thank you.
attack. Just as I'm listening to everything, it is very unfortunate, the situation we're in. I just feel like council is currently in a situation that voting no doesn't change this. So it's almost rubber stamping at this point. So I hate rubber stamping, so just, that's putting that out there.
Caleb? Are you calling me on my distance?
No, I'm calling back to the first time I came up to speak here. I feel like someone needs to say the quiet part out loud. This feels like twice tonight that a developer has built something before the process to zone it's been completed, and it feels like a fait accompli. Like this thing has been built, and now council has no choice but to vote yes, when it creates the image that there was no a flaw or something in the due process or proper procedure here, and it sucks. So what are we going to do about it?
Thank you. I will note, actually, I'll ask a question to Manager Sissons. Just to clarify, this is, when the development permit was issued, it was a permitted use.
Through your worship, that's correct. Yeah, there was nothing, it was a listed use under that district. So there was nothing that was hidden or out of step in that sense.
So the process we're potentially looking to improve is more on the development permit side than the zoning side. If we were to, as Councillor Sharps and others have mentioned, give a little, provide more ways for people to become aware that a larger building might be going in their area, that would be through the development permit process.
So through your worship, yeah. So as of right now, we do have some established processes for rezoning and for subdivision. Our development permit process in terms of notification is definitely on the lower end of what's incomparable to other larger centers. I will note though that by the more notification that happens, the longer. So those examples that were given before, there is a comment period of, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks that the development is basically in place. So just so that everybody's well aware that that does extend the development review time. It does take extra resources to do that, which does impact the cost.
Thank you. Councillor Knodel?
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Through the chair to Director Sissons. Just to clarify, the only reason why this is no longer in compliance is because of an update to zoning rules. Is that right?
Yes, through your worship, in 2022, we updated it and removed that particular land use that was allowed there, just because the intent of community services was more for public uses like school sites, healthcare centers, that type of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. But even if we didn't change the zoning, everything would stay the same. Councillor Sharps?
Sorry, I guess I just have one statement to city manager. Maybe as we're going through this, and I understand what Director Sissons is saying. So we changed it, I get that, and there was no impact, but there really is an impact. So I think maybe when we're changing these things, even though it's verbiage, we have to look at the impact to the surrounding community. Because I get it. If that was a two-story going in my backyard, I would be very unhappy right now. So maybe just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it. So it's if we're changing what that land can be used for, can we really look at the impact of that particular area? And I guess I am asking you if we can really look at that as part of our planning process.
City Manager Mitchell?
Through the chair, yes, I think we have to kind of sometimes get outside of our processes and think about who's living in these neighborhoods and be a little bit more conscious of that. And that's certainly something we can do.
All right, seeing no further speakers, I declare the public hearing for bylaw number 4786 closed.
So, Your Worship, at this time, I move that council give second reading to bylaw 4786, a bylaw of City of Medicine Hat to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from Community Services District to Medium Density Residential District.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on second reading. Second reading is passed.
So, Your Worship, at this time, I move that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4786.
Second.
Discussion? Counselor McGrogan?
Through the chair, I guess a question for the city manager, Mitchell. I'm curious what you would need from council, if anything, to address the communication gap I think we've seen in the last two bylaws. Do you need a motion from council to direct that activity, or how would that look?
Through the chair, I think I've got enough clear direction, and I think it's just something that we have to change in our internal culture.
Thank you.
Seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on third reading. That's unanimous, and bylaw number 4786 is passed. Moving on to item 8.3, bylaw 4788 to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from open space district to mixed use district. First, we'll have an introduction by Manager Planning and Development Services, Robert Sissons.
So thank you, Your Worship. I'm here to present bylaw 4788. So again, as per previous presentations, just a little bit of an overview of what we'll be talking about today. So the site undergoing the rezoning is a portion of 2802 13th Avenue Southeast, and it is located between 13th Avenue and the Connaught Golf Course. The application is to rezone the subject site from open space district to mixed use district. The subject site currently exists as part of the larger parking lot of the golf course, and it is subject to a subdivision, and as part of that, a condition of approval required the land to be rezoned to an appropriate district, so in this case, mixed use. The parking will be additional space for the adjacent commercial development. So this aligns with Council's strategic plan priority 1.9. The Norwood Grand site has seen significant development over the past several years. As the site has intensified, the developer evaluated existing conditions and sought additional land for parking. The parking lot for the golf course was not being fully used, so this was an opportunity to support this. In terms of municipal development plan policy, the site is located within the South residential sector and is designated as a suburban topology. Again, it's highlighted in yellow on the map. So surface parking that is behind a dense development along a major thoroughfare is appropriate in this context. So here is an overhead view of the site. Connaught Golf Course obviously on the left and 13th Avenue on the right. And then if you just look, so the labeling that says 27th Street Southeast, the area in question is the parking that runs north-south to the east of that, and then at the bottom of that as well. So kind of in a reverse L shape. This is a view looking north, the parking area that runs along the back side of the AMA building to the right of the 27th Street label is the area we're talking about. And this is a good view of the full area to the left of the Norwood Grand and in behind the AMA. This picture is from the entrance to the golf course area where the car is parked, is the start of the subject parking area. This is looking east from the former bowling alley at the row of parking. Again, that white car is basically the start of it, and it runs to the right. So this is looking towards the parking area, so the stalls in the foreground and on the right side. And this is the view from the southern extent of the parking area that's going to be subdivided off. The area to the left, so basically left of that hydrant, is where it transitions into the golf course parking lot area. So administration's recommendation is, it is recommended through the Municipal Planning Commission that City Council approve bylaw number 4788 to rezone a portion of 2802 13th Avenue Southeast from open space district to mixed use district.
Thank you. I will now declare the public hearing for bylaw 4788 open and call it to order. Counselor, before I ask for speakers, Counselor Knodel, I note that you had your name on the speakers list.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. My question is through the chair to Managing Director Sissons. I'm just curious about, before this process took place, did you get any feedback? I understand the golf course is on city land. We rent out the facility to the golf club. Did you have any feedback from them in regards to utilization of the space? I understand that it's underutilized. I just wondered if there was any comments made and if they're on board, or if there was any feedback that was not in support of this move.
So through your worship, I can't comment on the rezoning. We didn't receive anything from like the golf course, if that's what you're asking on this. Through the rezoning portion, I'm not sure if there was any, there would have obviously been some discussion as part of the land sale and kind of looking at what that looks like, so.
Okay, thank you. City Clerk, did we receive any submissions on this item?
Thank you, Your Worship. The City Clerk Department, on behalf of Planning and Development Services, sent out 144 notifications and placed ads in the the newspaper, May 20th and 27th, and we did not receive any submissions.
Thank you. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. For a second time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. For a third and final time, if there is any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. Go ahead.
I've actually got a lot about this one. I'm normally all for getting rid of parking lots and building housing or something else that can generate more revenue for the city. Parking lots also, they don't absorb water nearly as well as even bare ground does. So building a building there will actually prevent stormwater runoff and other issues. It'll actually fix more problems down the road. But there are a few questions I have about this particular move. Mixed use implies that there's going to be both commercial and residential, which would imply something like a 5/1 or some kind of, again, mixed commercial residential space. I don't know how much is available to the public at this time to be disclosed. But especially with regard to my usual questions about where the nearest transit stop is and how far away the nearest grocery store is. If people are going to be living there, what sort of business are they going to be living above, especially if they're right next to a golf course? There's a lot unknown about this particular property that I'd like to find out about.
Thank you. Manager Sissons. So I think two questions. What does the mixed-use district include? And then I think it's staying a parking lot, isn't it?
Yeah, so through your worship, it is staying as a parking lot, this particular area. So this does serve directly to the Norwood Grand site, which is basically a 4-story apartment in more or less a C configuration around a 3-story commercial building. So in essence, that whole site is a larger mixed-use development. And there's also, in terms of, the district, what is mixed use district contain in terms of uses? So residential is obviously one component. And we see that all along 13th Avenue. Several sites are. So an example is across the street, so Chinook Village. There's residential. There's also your typical commercial land uses like retail, restaurants, professional services, offices, that type of thing.
Thank you. Does that satisfy your request for information?
Well, given that it's staying a parking lot and people aren't going to be living there at present, finding out where how far away the nearest grocery store is a bit of a moot point. However, I do believe that rezoning this particular space winds up creating a potential for a future brownfield development for the city or something else that would be more useful for us than an underutilized parking lot. So I am in favor of this with the provision that we look forward to putting something more useful there in the future.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no further speakers, I declare the public hearing for bylaw 4788 closed.
Thanks, Your Worship. At this time, I move that council give second reading to bylaw 4788, bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the land use bylaw to rezone the subject lands from open space district to mixed use district.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on the second reading. That's unanimous.
At this time, Your Worship, I move that council give third and final reading to bylaw 4788.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on third reading. That's unanimous, and bylaw 4788 is passed. Thank you, Manager Sissons. Moving on to item 9, Committee and Commission Business Arising. 9.1, Energy and Infrastructure Committee. Councillor Van Dyke, as Chair of Energy and Infrastructure, do you have any meeting highlights to share?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair, I just wanted to draw attention to one item that we will be discussing in the future from the managing director's update, which is the solid waste management strategy. And when that comes forward to council, it will include information on the, sorry, I have to look at the name of it, the waste compressor out at the landfill. So there will be information coming forward about that. And I'm not going to discuss the other presentation items because Acting Managing Director Bohan will be speaking on 2 of them in this, and the other is for a decision.
Thank you. Any questions about the meeting highlights? Seeing none, we will move to adoption of meeting minutes dated May 18th, 2023. Any objections? Seeing, oh yeah, you could go.
Sorry. I move that council adopts the minutes of the Energy and Infrastructure Committee meeting held on May 18th, 2023, as presented for the corporate record.
And I'll second.
Any discussion? Councilor Dumanowski?
Your Worship, it's indirectly related to the committee meeting minutes, but I'm I wanted to, at the very least, bring to attention, and I think behooves us to do that, that we have a number of people, there's certainly a lot of conversation in our community around the expiration for a lot of utility customers in a rate that was certainly a lot less than probably what is currently out in the forward strip as far as contract rates are concerned. So my goal is simply just to state that to the public, and I guess as one of council members, that we are hearing and dealing with a lot of concerns out there about that. We're all in the same, many of us are in the same situation. The challenge, of course, before us is that we are, as we've made our amendments or changes to our bylaw, there were probably 9,000 customers who were able to, I'm going to use the word capitalize on a rate setting that was to their benefit, openly and transparently. I was one of them. I think what has certainly come to the public conversation of late is that there is an expiration date to that, probably for some already and some very soon, if not by the end of this quarter, which ends at the end of June. And so I'm simply bringing it up to I guess, say that we are hearing the public. We understand their concerns. And I guess out of that, or derived out of that, is a hope, if I could, just ask staff or staff's response to that conversation. One of the things that they want, or some are asking, is assistance in making and choosing the next direction. Should they lock in their rates? Should they not, et cetera? And so my goal simply is to bring that to attention, to say that, again, that City Hall and Council hear you. We are all working through this together, and I want to thank in advance frontline staff who are heeding many calls and are taking the time to walk people through that. In the end, though, the decision is yours, as it indicates on the slide. The choice is yours. But I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to do it as from the standpoint of those who maybe are not thinking about it, or are soon to receive some communication about their contract rates expiring, that where they can go and what those choices are.
City Manager Mitchell.
We do have the website out there as well, and we are working on some additional communications, but please feel free to call customer service. Is that the correct place to call? Yes, for questions, but we are working on some enhanced communication.
Thank you.
Further to Councillor Dumanowski's question, can you just, once again, I think, I don't know, I'm going to say Acting Managing Director Bohan, or Managing Director Pancoast, he's pointing at. How will people know if they signed up for a fixed rate, as I think specifically the individuals we're talking about, how will they know that their fixed rate contract is going to expire? And what are the consequences of it expiring?
Thank you, Your Worship. That may be best answered by Dennis as the lead for the community service, the customer service team.
All right, you pointed in the wrong direction, Acting Manager Bohan, Managing Director Bohan. Managing Director Egert.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you for that question. And all those that are currently on a fixed rate that will be expiring will be notified through email. And at that point, they will have a choice to make whether or not to stay on the RRO option, regulated rate option, or whether they want to elect to go into a fixed program or to a variable price plan. Either one of those choices will be explained on the website in terms of what the current situation is for each utility customer and what they're trying to achieve with one of those plans. If there's any further questions, there would be some support or help through our customer care group that would be able to explain the options and inform the customers as to things to consider when they're choosing an option.
Thank you, Managing Director Egert. What happens if someone's plan just expires? So they haven't had a chance to come in, the fixed contract that they signed up for expires.
So when the plan expires, and that'll expire after 6 months, if they're on the 22 plan, 6 months after they actually entered the plan or renewed the plan in late 2022, it would just expire, and that they would then default to the RRO rate.
And the RRO rate is variable. Prices are set per month at the beginning of the month, and they're based on a forecasted rate for that month. So that would be where you would end up if you just let your fixed contract expire. Are there any other questions on this, Councillor McGrogan?
Thank you. Through the chair, perhaps you could just explain, I know it's here, but just for anybody that's listening that might not go to the website, if you decide to jump back in after you've went to the RRO, how does that look and what are the implications?
Managing Director Egert?
So through the chair to Councillor McGrogan, and I see the website is up there, so for those in the gallery or watching online, they can see the screen. And I believe Rondi's operating that. If you could just go back to the 3 options. So the first thing that a customer will see is what are the 3 options available. If you do elect to go to the fixed contract, for example, you select that, explore the fixed contract. It has some more information there as to what the fixed contract is all about. And if you scroll down a little further, there's a request to request a fixed rate contract. Select that yellow button, and it'll take you to a screen where you can actually sign up online. You don't have to come into City Hall. You don't have to phone City Hall, and just enter the information on your utility account.
Can people do this before their contract expires? Like, do they have to do it like right on the day it expires or the day after? Or thereafter, I should say?
So if they are in a contract, they would have to honor that contract, and we would honor that contract. Once the contract expires, then they would have the choice whenever they choose to, then to elect to go into a fixed rate contract. The price of that contract would be set for that quarter.
Okay, I guess my question was more, if I want to plan ahead, can I sign up for the fixed rate and then it'll just take effect after my current fixed rate contract expires?
So through the chair, that's a great question. And although you do request, it would just get into the queue and wouldn't be acted upon until the fixed rate is completed. And I think there might even be a field there for comments or additional information.
Thank you. Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair. I think I just wanted to express a lot of our citizens are not maybe as tech savvy as myself. That's a joke. But I just want to encourage, when you do call the customer care line, the frontline staff have been just wonderful. I called actually today on behalf of the place that I work, and like Councillor Dumanowski said, they're not going to give you the answer, but they sure give you ample information for you to make the right decision for yourself. So kudos to those people that are answering the phone. They're doing a great job.
All right, seeing no further speakers on that item, thank you for bringing it up, Councillor Dumanowski. and more information is to come, so keep checking back at our website. And make sure you check your email if you signed up for the 6-month fixed rate contract. Moving on to item 9.1.3, advance approval to replace fire engine units.
Yes, thank you.
I apologize. I got talking and we didn't actually vote on the minutes, so we'll have to vote on the minutes. Thank you, Councillor Sharps. That's unanimous. So now we'll move on to the advance approval to replace fire engine units.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, this item came forward for adoption from council, and it is to order in advance 2 fire engines that were in the budget for 2024 and 2027. Looking ahead, there's issues with supply chain and inflationary costs associated with these. So the request is to move that forward now to 2023 so that we can get them at more reasonable pricing and get them in the time frame that we were still expecting them, because the lead time has gone from something like 1 year to 3 years. And if I have missed anything, I'd be happy for Acting Manager Director Bohan to fill in. Okay.
Thank you. So we'll need a motion.
Yes, sorry, thank you. I'll go on to that. I move that council approves a tangible capital budget amendment to increase the 2023 capital budget by $3 million funded from the Fleet Reserve to advance fleet capital funds from 2024 and 2027 respectively to 2023 to support the purchase of 2 fire engine units.
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a question. Wouldn't the same logic apply to almost everything that we buy? I don't know who that's directed at. City Manager Mitchell?
Yes. Sorry, through the chair, yes. And if I'm going to put Acting Manager Director Bohan on the spot, and fire equipment, I know from my experience, it's even longer out than regular fleet. But go ahead.
I will, just if you don't mind, I saw Managing Director Stouth's hand go up, and
he's got fire, yeah.
He may have some insight into this as well. So go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's an interesting question. Fire engines now are probably the longest out build for any of our large fleet. I can tell you the last units that we bought and landed in the city of Medicine Hat had a 6-month lead time. When we went into the business plan process, we were anticipating a 1-year lead time, but that has expanded to a 3-year lead time on fire engines. It's an extremely long period, and as the recommendation comes forward, there's by moving money from 24 and 27 into 23 and get these units ordered, we still will not have to pay for them until 2027, but we'll get them at a price guaranteed in 2024. And looking at the inflationary costs that are being predicted, we would save, I don't have the number right in front of me, and Pat might help me out, but I think it's $466,000.
Correct, yeah. Yes, thank you. And Acting Managing Director Bohan, did you have anything to add?
Your Worship, no, I think Managing Director Stouth and City Manager Mitchell covered it right off. That's it, covered everything.
Thank you. Councillor McGrogan?
Yeah, I think Managing Director Stouth answered most of what I was going to ask. So I was just wanting to make for clarity for our community. These are already planned purchases, and just so we're not changing the lifespan of any of the fire engines now that we're, bringing to life's end. I just want you to confirm that for the community, and then, so we're just really ordering ahead of time. Is that correct?
Thank you, and through the chair to Councillor McGrogan, we will extend the reserve use of one fire engine by a couple of years. The other one will be unaffected. Yeah, if there's a bonus to this, we get a we get a price protected now and we pay for it in 3 years' time.
Councillor Robbins?
That might, thank you through the chair, that might have actually answered my question. So we're ordering them now but not paying for them now?
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Robbins. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
That leads me to another question. If we're not paying for them now, why do we have to do the budget amendment?
Because we have to have a budget approved to order them. They're a capital item that we are procuring, so we have to have the budget in place to do that.
Okay. Okay. And any further speakers? Okay, seeing none, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous. Next up, we have transportation safety initiatives. This item is for information, and it includes a presentation from Acting Managing Director Bohan.
Yes.
So thank you, Your Worship, Council. I'm here tonight to talk to you about transportation safety initiatives that the City Assets Department's going to be putting in place to help the city. We basically follow a number of principles and approaches when we consider traffic safety. As a road authority in the city, we take this very, very seriously, obviously. We do follow the Transportation Association of Canada, the Alberta Traffic Safety Act, the Dangerous Goods Bylaw, and the Public Roads Bylaw, just to name a few. And we follow established processes for establishing speed reviews, crosswalk analysis, and that sort of thing. We do receive a number of public inquiries for different types of questions the community may have, as well as council. And the way we receive these issues is a number of different ways. We get a lot of mail, we get a lot of phone calls from the community. And the bulk of these calls come from vehicle speeding. We do also get a lot of pedestrian safety questions and cycling, but speeding is that common theme. One of the challenges that we have is that compliance with speed limits is very, very difficult and expensive for us to enforce. And it's almost impossible for us to, and our police services to be in all places at all times. So lowering the speed limit alone is not always an effective means of achieving a result of safe streets and safe speed for the built-up environment. Another one of the challenges we face is that when we build roads, and we built them quite a bit differently 100 years ago and even 40, 50 years ago, where we had wide open spaces, and that just was, we've come to understand that's like providing a bit of a freeway for folks to take off and drive. So part of the new environment as we develop and plan for our transportation safety is to actually create a different environment for the actual traveling public. So when we do get a call, it's kind of, I think this might be helpful for council and for the community, is we get calls regarding speeding. We dispatch an engineer immediately, or within reason, and they go to the site. They inspect the site, they look for sight lines. If warranted, they will install a camera, and this camera basically records what's happening in the site, how many vehicles, what times of day, how fast they were going, and we just count cars, essentially, or count vehicles to see what's happening at that built environment. Once we gather that data, then we pull it back to the office, and our traffic engineers analyze it and make some determinations about what's the best way for us to tackle whatever that issue might be. And as I mentioned previously, one of the biggest issues we contend with is speeding. So some of you folks have seen different methods that we've already got in place. We've got on First Street right now, I believe, a traffic speeding camera that will reflect your speed. That does have an effect, but it doesn't always work. And so we try and tackle this with as effective and cheap means as possible. One of the things that the department's going to do is we're going to try and pilot a few new options. And one of the options is speed humps. These speed humps are not like the speed bumps you see in a parking lot where it's straight up and down. These are actually quite a bit longer plateaus. And we're going to be looking at putting in speed humps along Ranchlands Boulevard as a trial process for 2 years. What's interesting about this is that we've discovered you can't just put one of these little platforms in because you create a noise problem with cars screeching to slow down and then roaring as they take off. So it's got to be done over a period, so or over a longer space. Something else to consider, these humps are not narrow. They're actually quite wide, 4 meters wide. And we actually have something very similar to that on the corner of, we're actually on the Dunmore Road Service Road on about 28th Street. It's on the east side of the road. We actually put this plateau or hump in place to direct stormwater onto Dunmore off of the service road. So that, if you're ever out in that area, that'll give you a sense of what you might see. So we're going to be taking and putting that in place fairly quickly this year. Another thing we're going to tackle is some of the pedestrian challenges in our downtown area. So down on the corner of 4th Avenue and 3rd Street, we're going to be putting in some temporary pilot measures, these orange candlesticks, you've seen them around, just to expand the size of the corner. And the design there is intended to reduce the amount of time a pedestrian is on the active roadway. And so we're going to be tackling that again earlier or later this year. One of the other options that we're taking a look at is how do we contend with some residential issues. And a number of communities, and well, I think most communities across North America are exploring this idea of mini roundabouts or traffic circles, and we're going to give those a try too. We've actually discovered quite a bit of residential speeding and our analysis up on 8th Street on the Southeast Hill. So we're going to be putting in place some very simple traffic calming measures there, a roundabout. And after this speed assessment, we're going to put these in conjunction with a water and sewer project. So we're not actually building up the road for no reason. This is actually going to take place when we've got other work so that we don't have to disturb the community more than once. We actually, the speeding concern on 8th Street's well documented that a maximum speed tested 80 kilometers per hour was recorded on 8th Street. And about 5 to 10% of the drivers were speeding at or above 85%. So what's it going to look like? So this is a preliminary design of what we're going to try and tackle in 2024. This is expected to reduce the fastest 85% of vehicle traffic by speeds of up to 14 kilometers per hour. And it will actually give intersecting traffic the opportunity not to have to stop at that intersection, but to reflect, slow down, and then make the turn around the traffic circle. So we do expect to see some other community enhancements with reduced noise from vehicles traveling quickly down the roadways. And if in the future the council decides to lower the urban speed limits, we'll be able to gather a lot of data that will help inform what we want to do going forward. One of the things that I'm quite excited about, again, this is a construct, the construct of complete streets. This is a concept that we want to introduce. It's been introduced in a number of major cities over the last 10 years, and they've adopted it as a a core principle of how they develop their mobility. And in this case, Complete Streets is the idea of making our streets safe for all users. I know it's kind of a crazy idea, but we'd like to make streets usable for more than just roads, or vehicles. So what we're going to be doing is, as part of our normal reconstruction, our repaving of one of our major streets, is we're going to take a look at, well, I'll just show you on the screen here what we did on South Railway a few years ago, where we widened the street and provided a much-needed multi-use pathway. So the plan is, and this is the exciting part, in 2024, is part of this roadway rehab on Division Avenue South, is that we're going to introduce a complete streets concept. This is all part of the regular road rehab that we're doing, and we're going to be we're going to trial this concept of continuous sidewalks. And that's the idea of when you come up Cemetery Hill on the south end of Division, that you could ride on a multi-use pathway and be at the same level all the way to 3rd Street. Now, what we found in the process is that we have a number of areas where we can't go all the way. We've maybe have 2 places where the sidewalk or the multi-use path will dip to the road level, but the bulk of the road will be set up on at that same and singular level. The idea will include multi-use trail, corner bulbs, shorter pedestrian crossings, again, reducing the amount of time pedestrians are on the road, and promote the pedestrians and cyclists in a driveway-style intersections as vehicles approach the roadway. And you can have 14 seconds back. Sorry, Your Worship.
That was terrible timing. Thank you.
I got to know my audience.
Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Through the chair to Acting Managing Director Bohan. There are a couple things that get me really excited. One of them is talking about marketing and communication strategies and things like that. And the other is changing the built environment to make it more effective for multiple people. And I don't know why that is. It just makes me excited. So I was very grateful that this came up on the agenda. And I'm sure Carter Gramlich will also be grateful. I took a picture of that Safe Streets for Everyone, or what Complete Streets, and plan to email it to him already. So I'm really, really grateful to see the opportunity to move through the community for everyone. I understand it's a big endeavor, and I think what I look forward to most is the mindset that, even someone like Mr. Orge up in the stands, not everyone can afford a vehicle over time, especially as the world becomes more and more expensive. There's a pretty big gap between those who can afford a vehicle and those who can't, and to kind of level the playing field of accessibility to move from one part of the community to the other, especially, and to add on top of that, there's that the active and healthy ways of moving. This is so supportive of that. I was down out for my partner's birthday. We had supper on the patio of Grit City, and there were so many people using the pathway down on South Railway there on scooters. I probably saw 6 to 8 people come by at about 7 o'clock on a Friday night on scooters, and that wouldn't have been possible before without that new pathway development along South Railway, and it contributes to the curb appeal for those businesses. There's so many things in my perspective that this benefits the community etc. So thank you for bringing this forward and for being committed to it. It's something that I'm very passionate about, obviously, and I appreciate it.
Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you. Through the chair, comment and then a question. So really appreciate that we didn't run to 30 kilometers all through the city. I think we've got a blue-haired reputation already. That'd make it worse. So I'm very thankful that that we're looking at other options. So I really appreciate that. The second thing that I have, the galleries are disturbing me a little bit. The question is these the 4-meter wide, what are they called, the speed bumps? Will they slow, so if the speed limit's 50 and someone's driving 50, do they have to slow down to, is their speed disrupted because of these? Or are they engineered so that if someone doing the speed limit can get over them smoothly without damaging their undercarriage or whatever?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the design of these is to continue the traffic flow. We've been working with emergency services to ensure that we don't negatively impact the ability of emergency vehicles to reach their targets for attending to different events, that sort of thing. So the intent is not to put people into their vehicles into the 20 kilometer zone. So I'd have to get back to you with an exact target speed rate, but my expectation would be in the 40 kilometer, 50 kilometer range.
As a follow-up to that, are we then decreasing the speed limit to the correct number so that the speed humps are consistent with the actual speed limit?
Yeah, yes, Your Worship, that's the intent. We don't have plans to bring forward the idea of reducing the speed limit. So this whole intent behind the various different calming measures is to get traffic to travel at the posted speed. So that's our target. So,
Thank you. Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, and through the chair, do these speed bumps, humps, tables, whatever, let's workshop that. Acting Managing Director Bowman, get the exact right way to call it. Will it affect snow removal at all on those areas?
thank you, Your Worship. I actually handle that department as well, so there is a wailing and great gnashing of teeth whenever we bring changes to the built-up environment. But everyone's kind of working in the same direction. So from our snow removal, garbage collection, they've got issues as well around turning radius, and we've worked with obviously the emergency services folks. So we work in tandem with them, and we actually adapt our plans to make sure that we can accommodate the other city services that we try to provide.
Councillor Hirsch.
So I appreciate the presentation, and I sit on this committee, so I saw it as well. I guess the question that popped on my head is that, I guess regardless of the success / maybe miss of these pilot projects, I'm just kind of maybe surmising a bit that you're going to use it on a reactionary basis as opposed to proactively, have this scattered about the community. I think, is that the intention, is more reactionary based on feedback from the community as far as speed zone areas, and that's one mitigant that you're going to use? Is that fair to say?
And
go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I feel like a horse trying to get out of the gate. I'm excited about these concepts sometimes. I think that's a terrific question. So if I can address it this way, the purpose behind putting these pilot projects in place is to actually inform some of our decision-making in the future. So we're being a little proactive in this. It takes time for us to get our projects put in place. We actually are developing a transportation master plan that will have the roadway system master plan for vehicles that feed into that, the transportation safety plan, which is currently being developed, the scope of works being developed, the active transportation plan. We're working very closely with the planning department to put that together, the public transit, and an aging infrastructure policy. So all of these fit into that planning component, and then we have an implementation component after we go through that. But instead of being idle and just deciding we're going to do all the analysis first and then come up with a decision, we've got proven practices through those agencies I mentioned in the presentation with best practices. We're going to tackle or test those that will help inform those various plans.
I am delighted to hear that we are piloting things and trying them and seeing if they work before we roll them out bigger, and so we can improve things slightly as we go along. And as Andy mentioned, there's the actual speed limit conversation. I know there's a bit of a divide on that, but we don't have to have that at this point because we're coming up with methods to control the speed limit through at the stated rate through physical means. So that's excellent. There are no further speakers. This is just for information, so we don't have to pass a motion, and we'll just move on to your next presentation, which is Stormwater Service Introduction.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Also an exciting topic that people tend to overlook is stormwater. I'm going to start off and we're going to talk a little bit about what does the city own when it comes to stormwater. We've got a lot of money invested and time and energy. This is a conservative estimate of the value of the various different assets that the city owns as part of our stormwater infrastructure. We do have lift stations. That's for when we have stormwater gets to a low point, we have to move it to a high point so it can drain further. So we've got 4 of those in town. A number of outfalls into the river, to about 3,000 manholes, 4,400 catch basins. Those are the metal grates on the side of the road that the water will either drain into or snow will melt into. We also have storm ponds, 24 of them, various other infrastructures, curbs, gutters, swales, that sort of thing. And we have over 300 kilometers of storm water mains and catch basins. So how does it get there? So stormwater, oops, not working here. If you maybe advance my slide. Thank you. So how does the stormwater get there? Well, as we know, it rains, falls from the sky, and it hits our major system. And the major system, a lot of people don't understand, is the roadways. So that's the road and gutter that we see when we drive along. And the minor system is the catch basins and pipes that are underground. And those are the, and then ultimately the water is either evaporates or drains into the river. That's sort of the final objective for that. So something that we see often when we get large-scale rain events are what's referred to as trapped lows. And this is something that's actually built into the system where our roadways actually have a low point in them that are designed to capture stormwater and let it rest there essentially until the minor system, the pipes that are underground, can actually catch up and the stormwater can drain through the normal system, the ponds and so forth. These are the trap lows that you see here occur quite frequently in some of the older areas that were built in times when we had little or very limited minor system or controls over the size of the pipes that were underground. And these are also the ones you see on the front page of the paper periodically with folks in kayaks and canoes when we get those periodic storm events. Please, folks, do not get into your kayaks when it snows, when it rains and fills up those trapped lows. These trap lows are a normal part of every environment, every city in the world, essentially. And you can see these photos that are on the screen are various different cities, just one in Calgary and Grand Prairie. And these do happen from time to time. We as municipalities that have been around for a long time, we have challenges. And some of those challenges are that we have older, aging infrastructure. As I mentioned, there's smaller pipes that were designed for smaller size communities, less density, those types of things. Plus, they're getting old. And they start to create problems for us that way. We're also adapting to more severe, frequent storms as a result of climate change and other factors. So we may have fewer of them, but they are more severe. We also have some very interesting scenarios here because we've got a lot of built-up areas that have trees, and when the hail comes and the storm is aggressive, it plugs our catch basins and even creates even more challenges for that stormwater system to catch up. So we do have some unique challenges, but as a city, and we try and address them in a number of ways. We've got some opportunities. We basically have a number of evolving environmental issues. We have to conform to a number of government regulations, and those regulations change. They are not static, so we're constantly adapting to those changes. We do have a catch basin and lead cleaning program, and we actually use CCTV cameras that we move along the pipes where we can, and they inspect the pipes to tell us what does the actual physical condition of those pipes look like. That helps inform us as to what needs to be fixed when and how we might tackle it. A couple of things that we do that to try and reduce the cost of maintaining our system include a lot of preemptive maintenance. So we spend a lot of time cleaning catch basins, ensuring that that they're clean and that we have very little debris in them. But we also, when it comes time to replace or repair them, we try and use cure-in-place pipe materials. So we can actually put a sleeve inside the stormwater pipe to reinforce it, and it basically doubles it extends the life to the same life that it originally had. We do have some challenges, and some of those challenges include consistent capital funding and consistent operating budget and a solid understanding of what the service levels, what does the community expect. The challenge with storm is it results from periodic events. This is not something that you deal with every day when you want to turn the water on your tap or when you flush the toilet. Those are things we see all the time. Storms, stormwater tends to be the forgotten child in the utility relationship. So what are we doing about it? So the department's embarked on a full service review. We're taking a look at what are the community requirements around storm, what service levels should we be trying to take on. We're evaluating different funding options. What could we do? Other communities do different ways of funding their stormwater, so we're evaluating what they might, what the best practices are, very much like our roadway systems. And we're looking at various innovations like the cure-in-place piping, pipe material, and looking at temporary storage and pumping. Those temporary measures. When we get a storm, there is so much volume. We can have a little bit of an impact. We've made a few changes to reduce some of the activities that people get excited about when we get lots of rain on water stored on our streets. So we're going through that extensive process. We'll be engaging the community. We'll be seeking feedback, and we'll be bringing something forward, hopefully in the very near future, for committee and council to consider.
Are those things more go forward, or those are to create a more robust system in existing areas as well?
We're going to try and take a look at all of those initiatives. One of the biggest challenges we have is we have a built-up community, so we need to take a look at what service levels we can deliver on, and then set a target for ourselves. So the short answer is it's going to include everything. The longer answer is there are limited options for some areas.
Thank you. When you're doing this, I'm sure you already planned to do it, but wetlands are awesome and they can really help with some of the stormwater issues, including making sure that there aren't like huge amounts of water being released at the same time. It also cleans water. So I'm not sure if that had been something you thought about or discussed, but I would love to see a wetland plan.
We've looked at a number of options for some of the localized periodic overland flooding that we get, and that included various stormwater initiatives. I know the province has looked at funding some of those in other jurisdictions, so that will form part of our assessment. It gets expensive, and as you know, we don't have a lot of standing water in the community. We actually have a number of water sources that actually replenish some of those wetlands that we currently have, so we're actually bringing water in. We don't have a lot of sort of standing water. We get, it's so warm here, so it doesn't last long.
Thank you. Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Through the chair to Acting Managing Director Bohan. I was just curious about the picture in one of the maybe the second last slide there with forgive me if this is just a refrigerator blindness, I missed it. Would you be able to tell me about this? And is there any unique innovations that you've seen in other communities or we are currently piloting or trying that you think is worthwhile to share with us just for nerding out?
So yeah, like we actually brought forward the idea of putting in traffic humps to deflect stormwater. And if you look up, when I was speaking earlier about the traffic hump on Dunmore Road Service Road, that's it. So I don't know if this it wouldn't be very helpful. If you look at the top of the photograph, you can see on the left-hand side a bit of a gray area on the roadway right in there. That's the hump. And the purpose behind that is actually to deflect stormwater that would come down that road, northbound, toward the person taking the photograph, and deflect it over onto the road. And these concrete blocks here, these are designed to absorb more stormwater without washing away or eroding the grassways. So that is exactly what some of our stormwater engineers are doing. And so that we hope to do more of that kind of thing.
Thank you. I don't see any further speakers, but I did just want to give you an opportunity. You mentioned, people can call in, and they do call in. What would be the best, whether it's a pothole or they're having their storm drain is clogged? What's the best way to get a service person out there?
So there's two. If I can do this, mw@medicinehat.ca, that will get right to the dispatch folks. We've got a system, city work system for identifying service requests and dispatching, and it's very sophisticated. We can log exactly where the challenge is and dispatch right from there. The other option is phoning our customer service line.
Thank you very much. So there's two additional items for information: Tana Waste Compactor Efficiency Update and committee outstanding items. Did any member of council have any questions or comments about either of those items? Seeing none, we will move on to item 9.2, Public Services Committee. Councillor Robbins, as chair of Public Services Committee, do you have any meeting highlights to share with the group?
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and through the chair. I do have highlights to share, and I sort of seeking some feedback and help from council to figure out what next steps might be out of our Public Services Committee meeting. So everyone's got the minutes and the package that came with the minutes. And sorry, let me find the exact page I want here. Oh, yeah, sorry. 9.2.4, Facilities for the Future. So at our Public Services Committee meeting, we had a discussion of facilities for the future, which is something that council, as I know, has been interested in for quite some time, really since the decision was made to reopen Moose and Crestwood. This is something that's been on our mind and has been in discussion, and something we're working on in Public Services and following it up on our outstanding items list. Anyway, so we got this information and sort of a request from our managing director and the team to provide some feedback about values, priorities, answer some questions so that they could narrow down the scope of what was being asked. So at the committee, we started to sort of go through their questions and then realized quickly this was really a conversation we wanted to have at council in an open forum, so that we could get into the questions themselves, and that people would be able to provide feedback if they hadn't done it through Shape Your City or in other ways, because those opportunities were available, but to talk to us about it and for us to talk to people about it. So I know that Managing Director Stouth has some slides with the questions on it, and so I'm going to ultimately make a motion on the fly here. Oh, scandalous. I'm going to ultimately make a motion that, and I'll tell you what it is before I make the motion, to take these questions away, to plan a meeting that's an open council meeting where we discuss these questions and try to answer them and give guidance to our city manager and, of course, the staff who are going to continue to work on this important project for all of us. So I don't want necessarily the answers to the questions today. Some of them we may feel that we can't answer. There may be other experts we need to contact to figure out the answers to the questions. But I think if we could review the slides, there's not very many of them. Again, I'm not going to propose we have any discussion of it other than to see sort of what's been asked. If you look in terms of highlights, which I know what I'm at now, is you'll see that there's some analysis and some prioritizing and discussion of what we may need. I just want to give maybe a bit of a warning is that there's some examples in here that are purely examples, and where something could be placed that's purely an example to sort of start a discussion as opposed to this is what we're going to do. I think city staff needs us to help narrow that down through a series of questions. So I don't want anyone on council or in the public to put too much stock into these options, because I don't think we're certainly done thinking about what the options are. They were just examples of things that were possible, but not the recommendations. We haven't reached a briefing note point. Normally we'd have a briefing note and I'd make a motion based on the briefing note. We're not in that position. So I'm not going to make a motion yet about the having a meeting that's just about this until Managing Director Stout has an opportunity to show us the questions, because there may be some discussion of the questions before I make that motion. So anyway, that's the highlights and sort of where we're at. Public Services needs help from the whole of council in this one.
Councillor Knodel?
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Just to confirm, so there's no room for any comments in regards to what we've heard from the public about what they're looking for in regards to these questions right now, because I have things to say. But I will hold off if it's not appropriate for me to comment at this time.
I think that the motion that Councillor Robbins was making is to provide an opportunity to discuss these questions in more detail. But I think is your question about whether the questions themselves?
I think so. I think that obviously this is a template that is going to springboard further discussion, and I understand we're talking about a time and a place where a more fulsome conversation can happen about these questions. I just wonder if there's any room at this current moment for me to share what I've been hearing from the community, or if I should just wait.
I think if it's hearing from the community, probably wait until we have the broader discussion. Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that we look at what the questions are, and then we'll all have an opportunity to think about it, Councillor Knodel, because if you start with what you've heard, I may say, well, you get that affirmation bias. I may end up talking to people who agree with what you've heard, as opposed to people addressing me who are sort of coming to it without an opinion already. So if you wouldn't mind waiting until the meeting itself, but I would like all of council to see what the questions actually are. I know they're in our package, and I think it helps the community to see what the questions are in case they have anything they want to pass along that we maybe haven't heard yet.
Okay, well, I'm gonna just hold off on dealing or viewing the questions. I think there are some differences until we get to facilities for the future. So we'll just move to the meeting minutes of May 29th, 2023.
Sure, I would move that council adopt the Public Services Committee minutes of the meeting held on May 29th, 2023 for the corporate record.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Seeing none? Oh, Councillor Dumanowski.
You speak, Councillor Sharps. I have a question. So I know we're going to be discussing the responsible animal ownership bylaw specifically, but in the minutes, it is indicated as an adoption item if I'm in opposition. I'm kind of going back to the old way we used to do things. So I'm in opposition to that. I will speak to it at the time, but would I then, we haven't had this for a while, would I then, historically, I would receive the minutes with the exception of, and I would identify which one. Would we be doing that today?
So I think the minutes are just recommending, the adoption there is just the Public Services Committee is recommending it for adoption. But then when the motion itself comes up, it doesn't prevent you from voting in favor of the fact that it was discussed and being adopted, doesn't prevent you from them voting against it when the motion is made. Was that the question?
It was. It's certainly different than the first 15 years I was here, but as long as that's what the outcome of that comment means to the public and certainly for the record, I will support that.
City Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to echo that. You're agreeing to receive them as they are for information.
Just point of clarification, it does say adoption. So if it were for information, it would say information. It wouldn't say adoption.
The minutes themselves, so not the motion for the responsible animal owner bylaw amendments. That's a separate one under 9.2.3. You can vote different than just receiving the minutes for information.
Okay.
But to Councilor Dumanowski's point, it could say, like it does say that the Public Services recommends that City Council approves amending the bylaw for adoption. So it probably is maybe a little bit confusing to have adoption written after that. Something to consider for the future. Councilor Sharps?
Yeah, more just clarification, because the briefing note is about the responsible animal ownership, but we're talking about two things within that briefing note, and one of them is the trap and neuter. I just feel like it's kind of two separate things. I'm kind of...
Yes, that's a fair point, Councilor Sharps. When we get there, any council member can make a motion to separate out the two issues, and so that we'll vote on them separately.
Understood.
Which is a little bit tricky in this case because it is in a single bylaw, amending bylaw. So we'd have to, if we reject one of the options, the entire bylaw will have to come back. So.
Mayor Clark?
Yeah.
Can I just make a recommendation that we, in advance, separate them out and then we can have those conversations separately?
I'm actually just rethinking what I said because it is a single bylaw. Two issues in a single bylaw. So we're either approving the bylaw or not approving the bylaw. So we can discuss each issue separately, but ultimately we'll have to reject the entire bylaw if one of the issues is declined.
Can I just have a follow-up question? Is there something I'm not understanding? Is there a reason to have these two separate issues into one bylaw?
City Manager Mitchell?
Just to go back to a couple of different things, sorry, I'm just catching up here. So to Councillor Dumanowski's point, when you're adopting or the minutes, the committees are just recommending it. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with that, because I think that's separate. But with regards to the bylaw, can we not, and clerk help me, can we not amend the bylaw and adopt the bylaw as amended if there's parts we want to take out?
I think Ben wants to answer that one.
City Solicitor Bullock.
Good evening, thank you. I think council could debate these issues, but council could give first reading to the bylaw and then could direct staff to go back and make amendments to remove, for example, the off-leash area matters out of the bylaw and then bring it back for second and third reading without those parts in the bylaw. I would not recommend amending the bylaw on the fly tonight.
Excellent suggestion. Thank you, City Solicitor Bullock. Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, and through the chair, I was just going to say that I would be willing to consider a friendly amendment, or maybe I could just amend myself, if everyone agrees. my motion about the minutes to change the word adoption to something that's more, resonates more and maybe is clearer on the record. Because there was a way of doing things before, and I just think, in 30 years, someone's gonna look back and say, well, they adopted that when we didn't adopt it because it said adopted, and that's the way we used to do it. So if we change that word adoption to information as well, the bylaws associated with it.
It should probably just say for adoption.
Sure, if we remove the word adopt is what I'm trying to get at, so however that is accomplished, I'm willing to amend my motion if I can do that. Or someone could make a friendly amendment and I'll agree.
City Clerk?
Just to add clarification to what I said before, is that we're just adopting it for the corporate record. I don't know if that helps with the wording, but that's what council's doing, is adopting them for the corporate record, not just receiving them for information.
Councillor Robbins and then Councillor Hirsch.
I had two things on this now. So essentially, because there is a motion that is part of the agenda for this evening, it does indicate that a person, such a councillor, can say, yes, I agree with the minutes as presented, because one area is for information. So therefore, you will not make a decision on that information item. The next item, you will be up for adoption or suggested adoption, because the mover or the item of 9.2.3 is separate and apart as the next item. So if a person did have an objection to it, at that point in time, they can certainly make the point. But what it's trying to delineate in the minutes is just state, one is information, no decision required. The next item that for adoption is what exactly is in front of us that is gonna come in 9.2.3. So I'm comfortable with that as far as the city clerk's making that explanation. Can we wordsmith something that is saying for potential adoption, or it doesn't matter how you wordsmith it, but it certainly makes it clear to me in terms of what we're trying to achieve here, so.
I think go ahead.
No, sorry, the other piece, I appreciate there's an alternative to do kind of legislation on the fly. I don't recommend it. In my experience, it lands horribly. Because there's unintended consequences that no one thinks of when they do legislate on the fly, and B, it never gets a chance for administration to have a little bit of feedback towards what are the ramifications. So I don't recommend that as a course of action. Thanks.
Councillor Dubanowski?
Not to belabor the point, but I'm just not going to accept the minutes. I'm going to vote no. In doing so, then I'm showing my rejection to item 1. From the standpoint of us voting on minutes or otherwise, to me, we're voting to accept them. So acceptance means I'm accepting them, I'm endorsing the format in which they're presented. So for me, it is I guess, an acceptance of the way it's written and what's written, and the word adoption indicates that. So just to make it easy, I will be voting no. Thank you.
Or alternatively, someone could make a motion to remove the word adoption from the minutes. Okay, my concern is that if there is enough concern about the bylaw, we'll be rejecting the minutes instead of voting on the actual motion. So we don't have any amendments, friendly or otherwise, so the motion on the table is that council adopts the minutes of the Public Services Committee meeting held on May 29th, 2023 as presented for the corporate record. Councillor Knodel?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I just want to clarify that it reads, we're adopting the minutes for the corporate record. We are not adopting the bylaw. I don't know if it helps that I said it again. That's how I'm absorbing it.
Counselor Sharps?
Can I make a friendly amendment?
Yep.
Council adopts the minutes of the Public Service Committee meeting held on May 29, 2023 as presented for the corporate record. So just the minutes. We're accepting the minutes for information. Actually, can I say that? Where council adopts the minutes of Public Services Committee for information. No.
It is something different, so I'll have to ask the city clerk's help here. What we are being asked to do here is actually adopt the minutes. So receiving the information, the minutes for information doesn't adopt them. It probably makes more sense to have the Public Services Committee adopt their own minutes, and then we receive them for information. But that's not currently how we do it. City clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. My interpretation of this motion that's currently on the floor is just that council is accepting by adopting the minutes for the corporate record, not an indication of being for or against what the committee recommended to council.
I think that is in fact true. I just think that there is room for interpretation that is not necessarily simply that. So we have a friendly amendment on the table. City Manager Mitchell.
Through the chair, if I can just ask Councillor Dumanowski, you said how they used to do it previously. Can you explain that process? I know I don't want to belabor it either, but.
Well, Your Worship, through to the city manager, so we had reports like, we did it quite a bit different, honestly, than we're doing it now, and that's fine. But, so we'd have a report like this, and some would be recommendation, some would be information, adoption, and we would indicate support for all of it, or we would say in support with the exception of, and it would be identified as Councillor Dumanowski in support, opposed, 1. That's how we used to do it if we had those situations. In this case, I will just not accept them. What's confusing to me, and the reason I'm sticking to my guns here is because that would mean we would never need to do anything but just receive the minutes. Why are we voting to adopt them for the corporate record if we are always going to be in agreement with all the items in the report? And that's not the case. So in this case, friendly amendment or not, I will not be supporting it.
Can we deal with the motions without adopting the minutes at this very moment? Can we postpone the adoption of the minutes to another meeting and deal with the motions on the table? Or the business arising out of the minutes?
Council would have to unanimously consent to withdraw the motion that's on the floor, because it's now at the will of council.
Councillor Hirsch?
So I think this is all going to pass. We have one dissenter. Can we please just move forward with our present process? And then the one feedback I would give the city manager in terms of the decision items going forward, make them, instead of it's information adoption, please make it information decision. So then ultimately what will happen is that will lead and springboard to the motion that will be on the floor eventually. By saying decision, it's not indicating anything at this point in time. It's a decision item that will be next steps as far as that goes. So that was kind of how it was prior. So you're welcome.
Okay, so we have a friendly amendment proposed. Do you want to withdraw it, or you want to?
I'm good with it.
Okay, you're good with?
This.
Okay. So we will vote on.
Do I need a seconder?
I think it's exactly as it was written, and I believe we did have a seconder. Councillor Hyder seconded it, I believe. Okay, we'll vote on the motion as presented. That passes. With one dissenter, we'll move on now to 9.12, 8.2.3, responsible animal ownership bylaw amendments.
I'm going to move this to get it to the point where it can be discussed. So I move the council give first read to bylaw 4681, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the responsible animal ownership bylaw.
I'll second.
Discussion? Councillor Knodel?
Thanks, Mayor Clark. So I would like to first speak about the trap neuter release option in front of us. I think that, to me, the glaring issue in our community is that there are many cats that procreate with other cats and fill the shelters and don't always get housed in loving, caring homes. And if we can stop the problem before it happens by spaying and neutering animals, then there's less of a likelihood that these animals will end up either euthanized or in a situation where they are in the shelter for long amounts of time. Now, I understand that we're looking primarily at feral cats, but I want to clarify, and maybe our city solicitor Bullock could help me. What defines a feral cat? Is it only a cat that is not registered or chipped, or is there a more complex definition that goes with that feral animal? And then I'll follow up.
Managing Director Stouth?
Oh, City Solicitor Bullock, I think is the one that was going to define that.
Either works for me. City Solicitor Bullock?
I think I might let Managing Director Stouth comment on it. I'm sure he's got some thoughts on that could be helpful.
Thank you. Through the chair, feral cats, not living under ownership, not identified as a licensed cat at one time, no identification.
Can I follow up, Mayor Clark?
Yes, I would direct you, prior to that, would you direct you to the definition of running at large, which is how in this bylaw that determination would be made.
That makes good sense then. Okay, thank you for building that connection in my mind for me. So if the animal doesn't have a loving, caring home and cannot be connected to one, it makes great sense to me to provide the opportunity for that cat to not create other cats that have no loving, caring home, and to contribute to the AA park, just as of, I think, today or yesterday, announced that they're no longer taking walk-in relinquished animals because that service has been abused. They don't have the space. There's many reasons they described why they can't do that. And I think if we don't contribute to the solution of taking care of these animals in some way or another, then it's just going to become a rising population problem with animals that aren't loved and cared for.
I'm going to just take a moment here. I have a feeling we're going to get into debate, so why don't we just vote on first reading to get it onto so that we've done first reading and then we can move into debate. Okay, first reading is on the table, or has been passed.
So I have on my list of things to do is to proceed to all three readings tonight. I didn't wish to do that, as I wanted to have an opportunity to hear what council had to say, and I'm sort of hearing some of the issues of dividing these things up. So I just will not move second reading. Somebody else is free to do so if they want to, but I feel like there's probably more work that could be done at committee that may help council with some of the things that, by sort of what's bubbling up here, seems to be maybe concerns that we could address with more committee work. And dividing these two things into two separate issues is something the committee is capable of doing, and sending back two separate pieces of information in the briefing note. I had the benefit of being at the committee and being able to ask questions, and so I know others didn't, and so maybe some of that information might be valuable to have that way. So I'm certainly not going to move to third and final reading and ask for unanimous consent. I could move to second reading, Mayor Clark, if you thought procedurally that would be helpful, but I'm personally am not going to move all three readings today.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think what City Solicitor Bullock suggested, and maybe I misinterpreted it, was give it second reading, or motion second reading, have debate, and then if a motion arises out of that debate for changes to the bylaw, then someone would make a motion to make those changes, refer it back to administration or Public Services Committee for those amendments to the bylaw. Because I'm not sure at this point that we really understand what the concerns are to be directing management administration to make the changes, or what changes those would be. Councillor Van Dyke.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was up. Should I wait until a second motion is made to discuss this?
Well, at this point, what will happen is it'll just come back to the next meeting for second reading.
Your Worship, if I, point of clarification, I think what I'm sensing is we want debate. I'm not trying to be a stick in the mud. I'm going to make my points, and I'm going to do it eloquently. I'm going to try, and I'm sure others will too. I think what we want to hear is conversation, and then I think I hear the chair saying, and then give it a couple of weeks and let the public weigh in, or however, or whomever, and then we would make our final decision. If it helps procedurally, because we have all three readings there, I can vote against unanimous consent, thereby requiring third reading to come back at another future meeting. And then we can still have the debate tonight, or the start of it.
Yeah, I could just not make that motion as well, right?
But then the debate wouldn't happen. We can't debate first reading. So without having any debate on the bylaw whatsoever, we don't really know, like, we're just going to be in the same position at the next meeting.
Okay, I will move that council gives second reading to bylaw 4681 for the purpose of advancing the debate.
I will second that motion.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you very much, through the chair. I'm just wondering if this bylaw, it's very restricted to cats and dogs. And we have a third animal population in the city of abandoned domesticated animals, which is rabbits. And we have a very active rabbit rescue in the city. And I'm wondering if any work with them has been taken into consideration, and if some integration could happen in this bylaw. There is a trap, neuter, release opportunity with them as well. I know there would be costs associated with that, and I'm sure that would require some investigation, but there has been a lot of work by community members to prevent some of these same issues with that population.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you, and through the chair. I have a few things. My very first question is, I believe it's I'm going to say it was the last council, there was an agreement to do more of a regional approach on the cat situation. And my understanding when I was talking to the Reeve, that was something that was on the table, and we were going to work with Cypress County to do something as Redcliffe Medicine Hat and Cypress County. Did that ever come to fruition? Was there more talks?
Managing Director Pancoast or Managing Director Stouth, do you have information on the progress of that project?
Through the chair, I apologize. I don't recall, are you referencing at the intermunicipal committee?
So it was brought up in intermunicipal. that it was brought up a couple years before a different council, and it was, Dwight brought it up and said, hey, where are we on this issue?
Oh, I see. I may
Yeah.
have missed that.
That's okay.
particular one.
Yeah, so there was at one point conversation about doing this from a regional approach. Yeah.
City Manager Mitchell?
Through the chair, we do have intermunicipal committee this week, and so we could add it and talk to them about it. Thank you.
Only because cats don't see the boundaries. So we have cats going from boundary to boundary, and we're picking up the entire cost. So it's just something I think we need to talk about.
I do just want to give Managing Director Stouth an opportunity if he had any information on that project.
Thank you through the chair, Your Worship. I don't have any further information on any discussions with Cypress County or Red Cliff in regards to a regional TNR.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Sharps.
Thank you. Couple other things. Can we separate this bylaw? I find having the cat bylaw with the off-leash bylaw is very confusing, and it's kind of going all over the place. And I had concerns with the off-leash bylaw that I feel if we separate them, maybe we could get one passed and not the other, we could just work on it. There's a lot of reference in this bylaw where council is, the way I'm reading it, we're giving our responsibility over to the Director of Parks and Rec wholly, and I'm not sure that settles with me. So I would like further clarification on that.
Managing Director Stouth.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Sharps. I appreciate the question. So in regards to council turning over their authority on off-leash areas to the Director of Parks and Recreation, so I can point to a couple of things, and whether it gives you any comfort or not, I don't know, but if we read 15.1, it says the director may from time to time designate areas where a dog may be exercised while not restrained by a leash, and may prior to designating such areas give attention to the following criteria or any other criteria the director deems necessary or appropriate. So when we refer to following criteria in the bylaw, that would be the criteria that defines whether or not an area is designated as off-leash, and that is determined by council through bylaw. What we are trying to do is be nimble, and if we have situations where we need to make a change suddenly because of some incident, we don't have to come back to City Council to put up a sign regarding an off-leash area. So all those criteria is A, B, C, D, E, F, G is determined by council. And with that criteria in mind, the director can establish an off-leash area. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think it answered my question. So in essence, if we agree to this bylaw, the director can make, and not that they would, there's no accusation here, but there's the ability to make ad hoc decisions without ever coming back to council. Correct?
Through the chair, they would be based on the criteria established by council.
Yeah, I think, I feel like this is very open to interpretation on that. So, and the reason I'm bringing this up is, as you know, there's so much conversation on the off-leash. And I remember last year when one of my friends, her and her dog were attacked, and one of the questions I had was, how do we determine an off-leash area? Because I don't see any signs, and the answer I was given was, if you don't see a sign, it's off-leash. And I'm thinking, holy crap, that is the weirdest bylaw I've ever heard of. So maybe before we throw out a bylaw, I'd like a better understanding of what we're agreeing to and where it is, and I'm hoping that as a council, we don't think that's a good idea. If there's no sign, you're good to go. I think that's super weird. So that's why I would like this reviewed in terms of the other authority being issued out.
City Manager Mitchell.
Through the chair, I think the other question that Councillor Sharps was asking too is separating, and I'm sure that Public Services Committee maybe looked at that. I'm just looking for some feedback on that from the committee.
There, not that I recall.
Like separating it to the two different bylaws, is
No.
that not what you were asking?
Yeah,
Counselor
yes,
Sharps? Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I
so
did.
Through the chair, we had some discussion of the two separate issues, and I did ask why they were in one. And knowing that the off-leash sort of policy direction is pending, and so this was, like, I think the example I was given is, right now, we couldn't open an off-leash park, like we've got a couple of them. We couldn't set up a new area without coming back to council to get that area approved. So it's just trying to identify somebody who could implement the policy that council wanted. So that's why it was included in this. That was my understanding. But I think what I'm hearing, what I was hearing earlier, is that dividing it into two issues so we really understand it, and perhaps making the change on one after we see the policy for off-leash might be a better choice. But that, the committee would be happy to consider the two issues separately, if that was council's will.
Councillor Canoto?
I would like to make a motion to separate out the two issues so that we can effectively discuss them.
Okay. I hear you. The issue we kind of discussed before is that in this case, it's not really two issues, it's one bylaw. So we would just have to give direction about the bylaw back to administration. That may include separating it, and it may also include additional changes to each part of the bylaw.
Received.
Okay.
Thank you. Got it.
Councillor McGrogan.
Some of my questions have been answered. I'm just curious, thank you, through the chair, sorry. I am curious about, on the responsible animal ownership bylaw amendments and how, and I'm thinking of the off-leash stuff in particular. How do we, are we solving the problem of, in my neighborhood, I have a pathway that's not signed, so I could just go walk my dog on it. So what I'm wondering is, will this require the city to have to go around and plunk signs all over the place and, you know, basically make every pathway, which are a multitude of them, the way they connect? So is this an expense we've thought about? Is this, and where are we getting the feedback on this that we'd want to do this?
Managing Director South.
Through the chair, to Councillor McGrogan, the idea was to do this through a combination of signage and an updated mapping, updating mapping presentation that is being worked on right now and would be posted publicly.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And my second question was around the trapping neuter, the release program. Is this something that's common in other communities, that we would take animals and return them to homelessness, I guess, if I may say that? Is it common?
Managing Director Stouth.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the chair to Councillor McGrogan. There's a peer review included in your package. It certainly exists in other areas. I don't know if I would personally use the word common. Lots of areas have a low-cost spay and neuter program. We have that currently, and we plan to continue with that, so that is available. The trap, neuter, and release program is an attempt to, under the current bylaw, you cannot release animals to run at large, and that's what a feral cat is. So with the bylaw change, you could had the cat, if the cat is caught and spay or neutered, and then it can be released back into the area it was taken from. The data that we have on feral cats is simply taking the cats out of the area and euthanizing them, or whatever the case might be, having them adopted out, does not cure the problem, because other cats then move into the area. So the data suggests that trap, neuter, release, putting a cat back in there stops the breeding cycle, but other cats do not move into the area.
Councillor Dumanowski.
This is interesting conversation, Your Worship. My comment is specific to the trap, neuter, and return or release program. When I looked up the definition of feral, and I don't think anyone's disputing it, but it does indicate an animal in a wild state. So these are cats who have either formerly been in captivity or domestication, are now not living in such an environment. And I can appreciate the broad intent here. I'm gonna, for the record, say I'm a responsible pet owner of dogs, 2 dogs, not cats. But so this isn't about selecting or giving positive commentary toward one pet or another. But for me, if anything, maybe at the conclusion you'll see. For me, I just absolutely cannot grapple with the idea of that to control feral cats, we're going to amend a bylaw that allows for them to be trapped in the first place. Secondly, spayed or neuter, which makes sense, and then returned, and we're using return instead of released, into the wild. We're essentially trying to do what, in my conscience, from that standpoint, is we're trying to do the responsible thing, but then we're going to release them into the wild and hope for the best. I understand the concept broadly, but I don't support it. And the commentary that if we don't return them, then other cats move in, would suggest then to me that if they move in, if they're not moving in there because there are feral cats returned to that environment, they're moving somewhere else. I just don't buy that argument at all. For me, we, as it indicated here, the current program does not allow for release of animals. Let's be honest, the concern we have here, if we're being honest, and I'm gonna say it, is we don't want to euthanize cats. Or we don't want to go through the challenge of identifying homes where they can be loved in the confines of a domesticated environment. I don't know if that's possible, if they've been feral for a long time, or from the point they were, at some point when they were released to the wild, or they were born into the wild. But for me, the whole idea of doing that is amounts to another form of animal cruelty, quite frankly. And that's, I'm gonna say that publicly. So for me, I just absolutely, this is counterintuitive to my mind. This is counterintuitive to how we're going to, in my opinion, control animal populations. And it goes against my conscience. We wouldn't imagine doing this with dogs, and yet we're happy to do so with cats and other pets. I know we have issues in other communities of pet overpopulation issues. I don't have a perfect answer, but I certainly, my conscience and my my thought process does not support this whatsoever, but I do support low-cost spaying and neutering, and I think that was a program that's been in place for many years, and I do support that and its continuation. Off-leash areas, to me, the way I interpret this, we are going to give staff the delegation of authority to identify, so that it's not always coming back through a committee, always coming back before council, that where they would see fit to designate an area off-leash, they would have the authority to do that. There's some challenges with that, but council could always repeal that at some future point if it were outside of their control. But for the sake of the debate today, I wanted to make those comments known.
Councillor Hirsch?
Well, I just, again, I'm trying to get to a point where we get some resolution on this, and we do have a motion on the floor. But what I sense on this council is that we're not actually supportive of it as it's presented. We could go ahead and move second reading, vote on it, actually decline it, and then a motion could be directed back to Public Services for review. Looking at, what I'm hearing is that we need a split from the TNR, have a discussion on off-leash and have that split. The funny thing is, which is, I chuckled inside, because the three things they talk about when you're a counselor, That's going to happen every term is garbage, off-leash bylaw, and roads. We had 2 out of 3 tonight. So I just suggest in terms of just procedurally, I think we can defeat this at second reading, send it back to committee. We could continue to debate this all night, quite frankly, and I don't know if that's a great use of time. We'll put it back to committee. They can have a great discussion. Certainly, people that are passionate about it can give their opinions to via the chair, and we can move this forward. So, but certainly, we can still talk about it all night if we want. So.
Point of procedure, Your Worship, if we were to vote no on this, we would have sent the direction, and maybe the solicitor can speak to it, but we would have to then have a majority of council bring it back at some future point within, outside of a specified period of time. If I understand the procedure, maybe the solicitor can speak to it.
City Solicitor Bullock.
If council votes against second reading, then that kills the bylaw, it's over. And then if council wanted to reconsider that at a future time, I think there's a 6-month period under our procedure bylaw where a motion could be reconsidered.
But in this case, it would not be the exact, the bylaw would come back in 2 pieces. Okay. Yeah, so if we vote down the bylaw, it could come, something different could come back, but this bylaw couldn't come back for 6 months. But I think perhaps my concern, and perhaps if administration wants to weigh in, I'm not sure that we've provided clear direction in terms of what we're actually looking for as a council. Managing Director Stouth?
Happy to take it back if that's the will of council and bring something forward to Public Services Committee in whatever form you desire. We can do that. But I'm not sure how to ask the question. I would want to have some sense from council, what's the problem with trap neuter release, and also what's the problem with delegation of authority to the Director of Parks and Recreation. And if I had a sense of that, I could certainly go back and rework that. Thank you.
Councillor Knotel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I won't repeat what I said already. I feel if I'm kind of looking at this in a sequence of what are our current services, what are the problems, and is this a potential solution for our rescue organizations? If our rescue organizations are at max capacity, we can't find foster homes, and we're starting to turn down people relinquishing their animals. We need to have supports in place so that those animals who cannot be housed because people will no longer take them in and the organizations no longer have space, then we need to make a plan to support those animals in some way that are homeless, which is sad. And I so much appreciate the comments of Councillor Dumanowski, because I am truly an animal lover, and the thought of just, like you say, there's a degree of abuse that goes with just releasing a cat into the wild, but do we increase funding to our rescue organizations in the community? That's an option. I think I would love that, but that's expensive, so this is an affordable option. In regards to turning over some authority to our managing director in order to make responsible and immediate decisions in regards to the off-leash pathways and parks, I'm in full support of that. I think that's an easy yes for me. I have confidence in our managing director, and big decisions will come forward to us. So that's a no-brainer to me. I'm happy with that, and I think that it's essential to make, we need to empower our staff to make decisions that are immediate in nature. I think that's an easy one for me.
Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, thank you, and through the chair, I'm going to support the bylaw, and I'll talk about each aspect just a little bit. I'm comforted tremendously in the trap neuter return program, and I hear what Councillor Dumanowski is saying, and I certainly respect his thoughts about it. But I'm comforted in that it was a request from local humane societies for us to consider this as a city, and that's how it ended up on our plate, and that there was engagement there, SPCA, A Park, Bylaw Enforcement, Persian Dreams, Canine Themes Rescue, and about all of this, and they unanimously supported it. And those are the people doing the work on a daily basis, so I sort of defer to their expertise and understanding of the problem that exists. And I also have some comfort, and not only are the cats neutered or spayed, but they're also vaccinated, which is better off than they were before that took place, and certainly better off than they would be euthanized. So I am going to support it because of the background of the humane agencies and their involvement in it, and that's sort of, we discussed it a little bit at committee, but it's also contained in the briefing note and so just want to highlight that. In terms of the second part of the bylaw, the director of Parks and Rec being able to sort of designate, we are, as council, setting the criteria, but we can't make every decision to implement our criteria. We have to rely on someone else to do that. So that's why I'm fine with that. If the will of rest of council is to divide it up and look at that issue separately, and maybe reverse when we talk about off-leash and when we talk about the delegation. I'm not going to be personally offended that that's the route that we go, but I think, like I said before, we couldn't open a new dog park at the moment without coming back here and getting all of us to approve, and that seems to be a little bit inefficient. So those are my thoughts. I support both parts of this bylaw.
Councillor Sharps?
Quick follow-up to Managing Director Stouth. Just to answer your question about what's the direction. In my mind, there's direction to separate these two, bring them back. And there's some that agree with the designation. I do not agree delegation-wise, and that's because I don't see the policy. If I was to see the policy that we're still working on, I'd be more comfortable with delegating. But to delegate that authority without having the policy in place seems really weird to me. So we're approving in advance, but we don't know what we're approving. And you had said earlier, City Manager, the policy is forthcoming. So why don't we get that policy in front of us so we can do B after A? I would like to do that versus what we saw in the bylaws today on land use. We were going back and doing something after the fact, and look how that affected everybody. So that is the reason I don't want to delegate, is because can we just get the policies on the table so we know what we're delegating?
Thank you. City Solicitor Bullock, I'm wondering why the trap neuter release return program requires a bylaw amendment. What happens now? Like if a bylaw enforcement officer gets a feral cat, it goes to our like A Park, our pound, and they just keep it. Is that so? Someone already has the authority to collect these cats.
Through the chair, the reason for the amendments is because the cats would be released and would be running at large. And right now, allowing a cat to run at large is an offense under the bylaw. So we needed to create that exception to that rule. So that's why it's an amendment to the bylaw.
Got it. And with respect to relinquishing unwanted animals, that is not a service that we fund right now. Is that correct, Managing Director Stouth?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, I don't think I'm understanding your question, relinquishing unwanted animals?
Yeah, so if someone finds a batch of kittens or has a cat that they don't want, we don't fund an organization that takes in those animals.
Through the chair, yes, we would, through our pound services contract. So if they were taken to A-Park, our pound services contract, A-Park would look after those animals, try and get them adopted, et cetera.
My understanding that there was a distinction between the services that the SPCA provides and the services that A-Park provides. Can you, that was from our public services meeting.
Our pound services contract is with A-Park, and so someone could take those animals to the SPCA or A-Park. We don't fund SPCA.
So currently, if someone has a cat they don't want, they could just take it to A-Park, and A-Park would accept the cat. Go ahead, Managing Director Stouth.
My understanding is they may based on capacity. If they don't have room to accept any cats, I think there's a strong discouragement from just accepting cats that are unwanted. The conversation is to educate and try to convince them to continue to house the cat, or perhaps they know someone that would take ownership of the cat. A-Park will shelter them, so will SPCA. But as I mentioned earlier, our pound contract is with A-Park, so animals that are picked up are taken to A-Park. But I believe you are correct, a person would have their choice of where to surrender an animal.
Okay, I guess I'm asking what are pound services? Like, what do we pay for in our contract with our pound services agency?
So our pound services would pay for animals that are picked up that are running at large and turned in, so they'd be cared for, returned to their owner. If no owner could be found, they would be sheltered and cared for and tried to be adopted out.
So it's animals that are picked up by bylaw is what we pay for.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Hirsch.
Well, just for clarification, so this is a long-standing issue. I do remember a time when we had pound services to an organization, it doesn't matter the organization, they were willing to accept the contract. Part of the contract, quite frankly, was when you can't have reunification and or it was a deemed a nuisance animal, et cetera, the reality is there was a euthanization portion of that. So that particular group basically said, you know what, that kind of goes against our organization, we love animals, et cetera. So they basically rescinded the contract because the ask was, we need a bigger building. Well, so it's a little counterproductive when we're talking about either you meet the conditions of the contract or we don't. The option to provide a bigger building to extend, if you will, stays of animals was a little bit counterproductive and was quite frankly quite expensive. So I think it's just important, and we mentioned about this. I don't have a problem having the debate. I think it's a bigger issue, but I will give you my feedback on this as well. And because Chief or Managing Director Stouth, sorry, previous world you were in, I will give you the feedback. In fact, when I look at nuisance animal, because my question is going to be, where are these feral cats going to be released? In my backyard? Down my street? So how quickly do they become a nuisance animal? Or where are they going to be dropped off? So a nuisance animal means any animal in respect of which there have been 2 or more convictions under this bylaw. So for me, when no one owns the animal, how do you make a complaint? So I'm troubled a little bit by this, and that's why I'm saying that we need to have this taken back a little bit. The other piece that I want to understand is the delegation to the director. I just mentioned that the three issues that I've had as a counselor all the time is roads, off-leash, and garbage. And to deflect or defer a major issue that gets brought up every term, and I'm not joking, every term, to director, all it's going to do is it's going to come back to us in a form of complaints, and we're going to hear it anyway. So I think we can retain this in terms of any areas that get deemed as being leash or off leash. It's going to come to us anyway. So I'm not in favor of delegating that to the director because it is such a very can be very explosive issue. So my feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Knodel, and we could have someone call the question as well.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I just wanted to read APARC's post in regards to no longer taking relinquished animals. So due to the high intake of pets and the limited capacity of our shelter, we will no longer accept pets brought in from the public. If you have or know of a stray or missing pet, please contact Medicine Hat Bylaw at the number. APARC Medicine Hat has experienced too many members of the public taking advantage of our services. Staff will direct public to contact Medicine Hat Bylaw when a pet comes into the shelter and refuse the intake. So I am curious if the contract defines whether or not they are accepting animals, and if it does, is this in alignment with what they are contracted out to do?
Councillor Sharps.
Sorry, I just had a quick question for Solicitor Bullock. When you were saying that this is with the cats rather, this is to address the animal at large issue, correct? The cats could be out and it'd be animal at large because they were being released, and that would make it legal.
That's correct, yes.
So does that make it legal for people that own cats to now let them out in the yard?
No, it doesn't. Only in the context of a trap, neuter, return program
How
could
do you
that be
know the
done.
difference? So if I let my cat out, no collar, no microchip, and they're running around, how do you know what's domesticated and what's not?
In that case, it could be defined as a animal at large, and I believe at Public Services Committee, Managing Director Stealth, or Director Wills, mentioned that there's a few like contextual inquiries that they will make, and they'll try and find out whether it's domesticated or not. But technically, it would satisfy the definition of animal at large under the bylaw. Councillor Robbins.
So, sorry, can I just clarify? So, yes, so you're saying, as a cat owner, I could open my back door and they can run? So you're saying two different things. So, City Solicitor, can I ask for some, if we can maybe take that back? Because to me, if it's at large, it's at large. How do you define Darren's cat that he kicked out or Shyla's cat that I let out? Like, how do you know?
Well, I guess we wouldn't know, but if somebody's cat was at large, the owner could be charged, but a defense would be if the cat was released in accordance with this program, that would have to be established in court. That would be a defense to the charge of the cat being at large. It's,
Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, so just to be clear, part of the program is to spay, neuter, vaccinate, and tag their ear for identification. That would show they were part of the program. That's contained within the briefing note. So you would be able to identify which cat was part of the program by the ear marking they're given after they're spayed and neutered and vaccinated.
My apologies. I thought your question was if someone really let their cat roam free, how would bylaw or APARC know that it was? Okay. Was that your question? Okay. I'm just going to weigh in. I think that there's been a lot of good discussion. I am particularly interested to know what remedies exist if a feral cat that has been spayed, neutered, and returned is in a difficult situation or is causing a difficult situation to the neighborhood, what avenues of remedy there are. And on the director delegation, I think it would probably be good to see the entire plan first and then make that decision. So with that, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on second reading. Unless there is any member that wants to make a motion. Okay. So that is defeated. And I feel like it would be helpful to have a motion directing administration to do something, but I'll leave that up to council. Doesn't have to be made today. All right, seeing no speakers. Yes, City Manager Mitchell.
Just for clarification, because there's been a lot of different conversations around the table, is it my understanding from council that you would like Public Services to go back, look at the bylaw, hearing what we heard today? Also, when we do bring it back, the bylaw, the policy for the delegation should also be in conjecture with that. Is that accurate?
I think we would need a motion because I don't think there was unanimity on
Yes.
any of those things.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion.
To do what?
To consider the bylaw that's in front of us or that's been defeated, to come back to Public Services Committee with a guiding policy for delegating responsibility to the managing director in regards to off-leash. Also considering bunnies on the trap, neuter, release program, as well as more information in regards to the trap, neuter, release program overall.
Can I make I can't make an amendment, but a suggestion? What if we just sent it back to Public Services to come back with a motion to do something with the bylaw? Because my concern is, it's difficult at this point to piece everything together. I think likely we probably need to maybe write something and bring it forward as a motion at the next meeting, like a notice of motion. But I don't feel like there's a lot of things to include in a single motion.
So Mayor Clark?
Yes.
Can we allow this to be a guiding motion, not an all-considering motion? Allow this to start the conversation, and then if we need to make any additions, we can do that at Public Services, because I think these points are important, but there may be others. This doesn't have to be limiting.
It is, so the motion would be direction to council. So your motion is on the table, so it just needs a seconder. I was just making a suggestion. Do we have a seconder for the motion?
I'll second the motion.
So council directs administration to consider issues of the trap, neuter, release, and return program, adding bunnies to the conversation. And rabbits, sorry. The organization is called Bunny Run Rabbit Rescue, so that's where the word bunny came from.
Your Worship, I'm going to weigh in. I apologize. Point of procedure, I guess. So the bylaw was defeated. So I don't know the legal vernacular, but in order for it to come back before 6 months, it would have to materially be different for one, and I don't think it will be, so it won't meet that litmus test. Number two, I think we can gather from the conversation happened today that we want staff to have a future conversation about this and look at it some more. I think we have at least 6 months. Now, council can bring it back sooner than that, but I don't know if we need 2/3. Sorry?
It is
2/3
2/3, yeah.
majority, and I don't know if you would get that. So I think time and energy over the next 6 months, plus by staff to look at this again and bring it back and make some amendments, perhaps, will be of good use. So the fact that we've just defeated a bylaw and we're making a recommendation to direct staff baffles me, quite frankly.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to mention as well the regional consultation aspect as well as being part of the discussion with administration. So that would need to go to outside committees.
Can I just add the last details? So regional consultation and a policy in regards to the off-leash designation. I just want to make sure that it's all in there.
So, point of procedure, we had a motion on the table that was seconded in language that was already, and now we're wordsmithing on the fly on a motion that was already seconded. So, I'm not comfortable with this, quite frankly, because we just need to either withdraw the motion, have some discussion in terms of, and I truly believe the fact that we have this discussion can be very much the power and purview of the chair to bring this forward as far as an item for discussion. And then however that forms in the future, and that's the purview of the chair and committee to make that as an agenda item at the next meeting or whatever they feel. I don't know as much as that it has to be directed. We know that we've got an issue here. That's something that can be spearheaded by the committee as we move forward. So I think we're getting caught up on trying to be procedurally here, and I think the message has definitely been heard by the chair that we can take this back and recreate something.
My concern, though, is that there wasn't unanimous, on each particular thing, it's unclear whether there's majority support for various things. So as long as Councillor Robbins is okay with the changes, we can still vote on the motion. Because you were the seconder, correct? Okay. So so Ramona withdraws her second. Is there a seconder for this motion?
Can I just make an amendment that council direct administration to bring this back to public services for further discussion?
Except it was defeated. You certainly can make that motion. Councillor Robbins?
I was going to offer a friendly amendment to this whole motion to say council directs that this item return to the outstanding items list on the public services agenda.
Yes.
And we will then take care of it from there.
Thank you.
Do you consider that a friendly amendment, Councillor Knodel? Okay, we'll vote on the motion. So we don't have our voting software available. Does anyone object to the motion being passed? Oh, here we go. All right, that passes. So it is 20 to 10. The next item is 9.2.4, Facilities for the Future. And that was Managing Director Stouth.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just quickly run over this slide deck, talk about the questions that we'd like to propose to council to help us narrow our focus and bring back relevant options for council debate regarding recreation facilities for the future. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with this check-in point. A couple of examples up there. Simplistic values that we want to determine, are we addressing our residents only, or is tourism an important part of that? And is it as important? Is it more important? So that's where our questions will go. More complex value, is financial efficiency the driver? How does it rate in importance with social values or health impact? So those questions are forthcoming. There's some definitions here. Social Value Canada defines social value. You can read it there if you like, but it will also be included in the survey link that we're going to provide to council, along with the rest of those impacts and values. So as far as the questions that we want to pose to council, we're going to ask you to rank the importance of the following general themes in the context of making decisions that you would make on recreational facilities in Medicine Hat. So 1 is most important, 5 least important, social, human health, environmental values, economic efficiency, leading edge modern facilities. If they were all of equal importance to you, you could rank them all as a 1. So you have that option. Council's already acknowledged the importance of making decisions that address our demographic projections, and we know as we move forward, we're going to have more seniors in our community. So, you know, apart from more age-friendly activities, what other strategies should we prioritize to address this trend? We also know that Council's provided direction on purposeful growth, and we're going to take that into account as we develop options for council to debate. So under the general priorities, again, we're going to ask council to rank, are we meeting the needs of residents, being our local taxpayers? Are we promoting tourism and opportunities to generate more tourism opportunities? Those would be destination type facilities. And then regarding purposeful growth, business development, and focusing on strategies to attract new labor talent, corporate entities, and economic development through recreational amenities. And again, 1 is the most important, 3 the least. If they're all of equal importance to you, you can rank them all a 1. And then we have a question that we would like to get some feedback from council. Should a facility meet more than a recreational need? So do you think there are other things that would be important to incorporate? Library access to different social services or immigration services, example of a pharmacy. You may have other things that come to mind, and you'll have an opportunity to put that in a text box. Location, so to what degree are the existing placement of facilities important to maintain? So existing location, paramount, facilities shouldn't be moved. Existing placement should be considered strongly. Existing location should be considered, but if could be relocated if a better option for service delivery exists. existing placement is not a major consideration and existing placement or location is not at all a factor. So we're asking you to select one of those as what you believe is important. Location, more on location, question about walkable to a recreational facility. And again, we had some contrasting information come back in the master plan. Being in a community was important. Even if I don't walk to it, if I drive to it, having it in a community was important. We feel that's probably true community walkability when it comes to things like outdoor swimming pools. When it comes to rinks, it's probably not as important because people drive their kids all over town to play wherever, to have their kid play at whatever rink they're scheduled to play. How important is it for recreational facilities to be easily accessible by modes of active transportation? So walking, biking, those kind of things, or is reliance on vehicles adequate? And then what potential site options address other priorities? So this is a strong town's direction or consideration, providing infill opportunities, thickening up the area, supporting a vibrant downtown, supporting other industry attraction growth. To what degree do you agree with the following statements? So this is about the financial side of it, facilities and services being largely subsidized through taxes to be affordable and inclusive for everyone. Facilities and services should be equally cost recovered through taxes and user fees. Facilities and services should be more heavily sustained through user fees. We do have a green play model that we can apply all kinds of programming to and help us answer these questions in a more detailed fashion. This is just a general question that we're seeking counsel on what level do you agree with those statements. Social and health considerations. So there is a definition of health impact on the first page, and it would be in the survey link. What does health impact mean to you? We want to try and make sure we hit that right. Measures of success for positive impacting health of residents. So examples could be reduction in local doctor visits, increased usership of fitness programs, or increased use of active transportation options. How do you feel about the strategy to incorporate several social and health services in the same location? Could be doctors, rehab, labs, addiction counseling, etc. Is there any need to try and incorporate any of that into recreation facilities? More on social health and health. What does social value mean to you? Interested to get council's perspective on that. And what do you consider measures of success for positively impacting social conditions in a community? So another question for you to consider on social and health considerations. Accessibility and inclusion, we're almost done, and if I had 5 minutes, I see I've blown it. Yeah, Pat got 10, I'll ask for 10. To what degree does accessibility and inclusion play a factor in the decisions we make? We stick to simply to building codes, or do we think about things that go farther than that? And 16 touches on some of that. Many new Canadians, they're calling medicine at home, and immigration is probably going to be a big part of our future. How important is it we deal with language and cultural barriers? And then this is the last one, and this is kind of a run at a vision statement, if you want to call it that. Parks and Recreation Operations Program Services Center Equity, so that all people in a community have fair and just opportunities to be as healthy as possible so they can thrive. Parks and Recreation are anchor institutions for health and well-being in communities. We should be moving away from terminology such as amenities. These spaces are not just nice to have in communities. They're essential, vital spaces and programs that are social drivers of health, resilience, and equity. So we're just asking you to what extent you agree or disagree with that statement. And there'll be a text box there for an answer. And if it's the will of council to have a separate meeting on this, we can consolidate the responses and bring them back for further discussion to help us as we move to bringing forward recommendations.
Councillor McGrogan?
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks for that. I thought they were excellent questions. The one that I guess was kind of glaringly absent to me, that I think would be great to get council feedback on, is the importance of partnerships with county, town of Red Cliff, private partnerships, not-for-profit partnerships, and where we might go with that. I would really like to see something like that. I'd love to hear eventually what council would think of that.
Through the chair to Councillor McGrogan, we can certainly add that question in there, and it relates back to some of the intermunicipal discussions that we're having on other topics. So happy to add that.
So this is being provided for information. The survey will be sent out to council, and we will at some point decide how that will be fed back to council.
Through the chair, yes. We can provide that information back, consolidate it. We can take that information and start to build options to bring back to council for debate on different options. If you want to have a separate meeting, discussion, workshop, whatever you want to call it, meeting, and have a further discussion on council's response to the questions, we can do that too. I'm happy to take the survey responses and consolidate them, present them back to council for information, but use that information to make sure we're hitting the mark as we develop or narrow our focus on the options that we want to bring forward that are important and relevant to council.
Councillor Robbins.
I actually have a motion I'd like to make. I think I foreshadowed about it earlier. Would this be a good time to do that? So I would like to make a motion to direct administration to organize a council engagement open meeting to consider the answers to these questions and have further discussion, again, in the open setting.
I'll second that.
All right. Councillor Hyder, did you have, your name is on the list.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through the chair, I just would like to, I appreciate Managing Director Stowe's work on this and ready to take on the task with his team. I look forward to the discussions and information.
All right, we have a motion on the table. Any discussion? Oh. We really should do that before we second it, but okay. Sorry, council direct administration to organize a council engagement open meeting.
I think I called it a meeting because I think it'll need to be advertised. And,
Yep.
right,
To,
to discuss the facilities for the future. Thank you. Feedback and recommendations. Thank you, Councilor McGrogan.
all right. Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That's passed. There's an additional information item under Public Services, and under 10.1, there's the Public Commission minutes from Police Commission minutes from March 23rd, 2023 for information, and no further business, so this meeting is adjourned.